Good evening, insomniacs and night wanderers. You're tuned in to WNMR, Nocturnal Mysteries Radio, and I'm Edward Cronkite, your guide through the darker corners of the waking world. It's just past 10 on this crisp October night, and the wind's been rattling my studio windows like restless fingers all evening. Got my usual cup of black coffee steaming beside the microphone and a stack of letters that arrived this week, each one a window into experiences that most folks would rather forget. Tonight, we're diving into something that hits close to home for a lot of working people out there. You know those late-night gas stations, the ones glowing like lonely beacons along empty highways? Places where the fluorescent lights buzz like angry insects and the air smells of petroleum and broken dreams? Well, it turns out the folks who work those graveyard shifts, the ones pumping our gas, restocking our energy drinks, and watching over us when the rest of the world's asleep, they see things that don't belong in the realm of regular business hours. I put out a call 2 weeks ago asking gas station employees to share their stories, and let me tell you, the response has been illuminating. Tonight's first tale comes from Phoenix, Arizona, where the desert heat gives way to surprisingly chilly October nights. The sender goes by John, though something tells me that might not be his real name. John works the night shift at a Shell station off Interstate 17, one of those places where truckers grab coffee at 3 a.m. and insomniacs fuel up for nowhere in particular. His email arrived last Tuesday morning, time-stamped 4:47 a.m. The subject line was simple: "You won't believe what happened at pump number 4. Well, John, after 15 years of collecting these stories, I've learned that belief is a luxury most of us can't afford. Sometimes we just have to listen." Let me read you what John wrote. "Edward, I've been listening to your show for about 8 months now, usually during my breaks at work. Never thought I'd be writing in. But what happened last week has me questioning everything I thought I knew about this job, about reality, if I'm being honest. I'm 30 years old, been working the graveyard shift at a Shell station in Phoenix for almost 3 years now. It's not glamorous work, but it pays the bills and gives me something to do while I figure out what comes next in life. The station sits at the edge of what used to be farmland, back before developers turned it all into strip malls and subdivisions. Now it's just us, a 24-hour McDonald's across the street, and a whole lot of nothing stretching out toward the mountains. Most nights are routine. Truckers stopping for fuel and bitter coffee, the occasional drunk trying to sober up before driving home, teenagers buying energy drinks with crumpled bills. But pump number 4, that pump's always been different. It's the one furthest from the building, sitting under a light that flickers more than it should. I've reported it to management at least a dozen times, but somehow it never gets fixed. The maintenance guys say there's nothing wrong with it, that it tests fine, but I'm telling you, that light has a mind of its own. The pump itself works perfectly. Dispenses gas just like the others, accepts credit cards, prints receipts. But there's something about the way it sounds when it's running. A wheeze almost, like someone with bad lungs struggling to breathe. I mentioned it to my supervisor once and he just laughed, said it was probably the vapor recovery system acting up. But I know what machinery sounds like, Edward. I grew up around my dad's auto shop. This isn't mechanical. Last Thursday night, well, technically Friday morning around 2:30 a.m., a guy pulled up to pump 4 in a dark blue sedan. Nothing unusual about him at first glance. Middle-aged, wearing a polo shirt and khakis like he'd just gotten off work at some office job. He had that tired look people get when they're driving home after a long day, you know. Eyes a little glazed, shoulders slumped. I was restocking cigarettes behind the counter when he started pumping. That's when I heard it. That wheezing sound, but louder than usual, raspier, like someone fighting for every breath. I looked out through the window, and the guy at pump 4 was just standing there, holding the nozzle in his car's tank, staring off into space. But the sound wasn't coming from him. It was coming from the pump itself. The LED display on the pump started flickering, not just dim, but cycling through different colors. Red, blue, white, then this sickly yellow that reminded me of old fluorescent bulbs about to die. And with each flicker, that wheeze got worse. I stepped outside to check on the customer, thinking maybe there was a problem with the pump. As soon as I opened the door, I was hit with this smell. Not just gasoline, that's normal. This was gasoline mixed with something else. Something medicinal, sharp and clean, like isopropyl alcohol or hand sanitizer. "Everything okay out here?" I called out to the guy. He didn't respond, just kept staring at the pump display, which was now cycling through numbers that didn't make sense. Instead of showing gallons and dollars, it was flashing random sequences: 7.73, 12.41, 23.98, then back to normal for a few seconds before starting over. I walked closer, and that's when I realized the wheezing wasn't coming from the pump's machinery. It was coming from inside the pump, like someone was trapped in there, gasping for air. "Sir?" I tried again, reaching out to tap the guy's shoulder. He turned to look at me, and his face, Edward, his face was wrong. Not in any way I can properly describe. He looked normal, same tired, middle-aged guy, but his eyes were too bright, too focused, like he was seeing something I couldn't. "Do you hear that?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Hear what?" "The breathing. It's so loud." I listened, and yeah, the wheezing was getting worse. Desperate, almost, like someone suffocating. The pump clicked off automatically. Tank was full. But neither of us moved to hang up the nozzle. The customer just stood there holding it, listening to that horrible rasping sound. "You should probably," I started to say, pointing at the nozzle. That's when the LED display went completely dark for about 3 seconds. When it flickered back on, there was a message scrolling across it: "Help me breathe." I blinked, sure I was seeing things, but it was there, clear as day, scrolling from right to left in red letters: "Help me breathe." The customer saw it too. His hand started shaking, and he dropped the nozzle. It hit the concrete with a metallic clang, and gasoline sprayed everywhere before the emergency shutoff kicked in. "Did you see that?" he asked, backing away from the pump. "See what?" I lied, because what else could I do? Tell him that yes, I saw the pump asking for help breathing? That I'd been hearing that wheeze for months? He didn't buy it, just shook his head, threw a $20 bill at me, and got back in his car. Drove off without waiting for change, tires squealing as he turned onto the access road. I stood there for a few minutes, staring at pump 4. The LED was back to normal, showing the final transaction: $18.73 for 6.2 gallons of regular unleaded. No weird messages, no flickering colors. Just a normal gas pump. But the wheezing continued for another 10 minutes. Slow, labored breathing that seemed to echo from somewhere deep inside the pump housing. I tried to ignore it, went back inside to finish my cigarette inventory, but I could still hear it through the windows. Around 3 a.m., it finally stopped. I didn't think much more about it until the next night. Different customer, same pump. This time it was a woman in her 20s driving a little Honda Civic. She pulled up to pump 4 around midnight, and as soon as she started fueling, that wheezing started up again. But this time I was watching more carefully. and I noticed something I'd missed before. The woman wasn't alone. There was someone else at the pump with her, a figure standing just behind her. Slightly to the left, wearing what looked like a white coat or shirt. I could only see it in my peripheral vision. Whenever I looked directly, there was nothing there, just the woman pumping gas. But in the corner of my eye, that figure was clear as day. An older man, thin, with his hands pressed against the pump housing like he was trying to push his way out. His mouth was open, and I swear I could see his chest rising and falling in rhythm with that terrible wheezing sound. The woman finished pumping and went inside to pay. I tried to act normal, rang up her gas and a pack of gum, made small talk about the weather. But the whole time, I kept glancing out at pump 4. The figure was still there, even with no one pumping gas, still pressed against the pump, still struggling to breathe. "Is everything okay?" the woman asked, following my gaze out the window. "Yeah, just thought I saw something." She looked out at the pump, then back at me with a concerned expression. "You mean that man in the white coat?" My blood went cold. "You can see him?" "See him? He's been standing there since I pulled up. I thought he worked here." She paused, studying my face. "He doesn't work here, does he?" I shook my head, unable to speak. "Then who is he? And why does he keep looking at me like that?" I forced myself to look directly at pump 4, really look, not just glance. And for just a moment, maybe 2 seconds, I saw him clearly. An elderly man in a white medical coat, his face gaunt and desperate. His hands were flat against the inside of the pump's display window, and his mouth was moving like he was trying to say something. Then he was gone. The woman left quickly after that, and I spent the rest of my shift avoiding pump 4. But I couldn't stop thinking about that white coat. It looked medical, like a doctor's coat, or maybe a lab technician's. The next day I did some research, went to the library and looked up the history of the land where our station sits. Turns out, before it was farmland, before it was anything else, there used to be a small medical clinic here. Built in 1953, torn down in 1987 to make way for development. The clinic specialized in respiratory therapy, helping people with breathing problems, emphysema, asthma, lung damage from industrial work. According to the old newspaper articles I found, they had this experimental treatment that involved pressurized oxygen chambers, revolutionary for its time. One article mentioned a Dr. Harold Morrison who ran the clinic for 30 years. The picture was grainy, but he looked familiar. Thin face, kind eyes, always wearing a white coat. The same article mentioned that Dr. Morrison died at the clinic in 1986, the year before it was demolished. Massive heart attack while treating a patient. They found him collapsed next to one of the oxygen chambers, apparently trying to get air to a patient whose equipment had malfunctioned. "Edward, I think Dr. Morrison is still here, still trying to help people breathe. But instead of an oxygen chamber, he's trapped inside a gas pump, listening to the sound of vapors and fumes, probably thinking they're patients who need his help. I haven't worked a shift since I found those articles. Called in sick 3 nights running, then finally told my manager I was quitting. Didn't give him a reason, just said I found something better. But I drive by the station sometimes, late at night, and pump 4 is always busy. There's always someone there, pumping gas. And if you look carefully, really carefully, you can see Dr. Morrison standing beside them, his hands pressed against the pump housing, his mouth open in a silent scream for air. I don't think he knows he's dead, Edward. I think he's still trying to save people, one breath at a time. The worst part? Sometimes when the wind's just right, you can hear that wheezing from 3 blocks away. Thanks for reading this. I needed to tell someone, and I figured if anyone would understand, it'd be you. Stay safe out there. John. John, wherever you are tonight, I want you to know that your story reached me in ways you might not expect. After reading your letter, I made a few calls to medical facilities in the Phoenix area. The Arizona Respiratory Institute confirmed that Dr. Harold Morrison was indeed a respected pulmonologist who dedicated his life to helping people with breathing disorders. He was known for staying late, for going above and beyond for his patients. They also confirmed the details of his death, found collapsed beside a malfunctioning hyperbaric oxygen chamber, apparently having suffered a massive heart attack while trying to manually operate the equipment for a patient in distress. The patient survived. Dr. Morrison did not. But here's what troubles me about your story, John. It's not the ghost of a dedicated doctor still trying to heal people, though that's tragic enough. It's the fact that 3 other gas station employees have written to me about pump malfunctions in the past month. 2 in Arizona, 1 in Nevada, all involving pumps that wheeze, LED displays that show strange messages, and the persistent smell of medical-grade alcohol. Makes you wonder how many of our everyday spaces are built on the bones of places where people dedicated their lives to helping others. Makes you wonder what kind of energy that leaves behind. The October wind's really howling now, folks. Can hear it pulling at the power lines outside my studio. October's always been a thin month when the barrier between worlds grows gossamer fine. Maybe that's why stories like John's find their way to me. Maybe that's why the dead feel compelled to keep working, even when their shifts should have ended decades ago. We've got more tales from the night shift coming your way. Stories from cashiers and mechanics, pump jockeys and managers. Each one a reminder that the most ordinary places can harbor the most extraordinary mysteries. But first, let me share something with you. Yesterday, I received a voicemail from an unknown number. Poor connection, lots of static, but I could make out an elderly male voice saying, tell them I'm still helping. Tell them the air is clean now." The call came from a disconnected line in Phoenix, Arizona, area code 602, the same area code as the demolished Morrison Respiratory Clinic.
Keep breathing easy, night owls. We'll be right back after this message from our sponsors.
Welcome back to the Witching Hour, my restless listeners. That was Midnight Syndicate's grisly reminder. Seemed fitting for tonight's theme. The coffee's still hot, the wind's died down to an uneasy whisper, and my phone's been ringing off the hook since John's story. Seems like our gas station tales have struck a nerve with folks who thought they were alone in their experiences. Before we dive into our next story, I want to address something. A listener named Patricia called during the break, voice shaking, saying she recognized the Shell station John described. She drives past it every night coming home from her job at Sky Harbor Airport, and she's noticed that Pump 4 is always roped off now. Yellow caution tape, out of order signs. Management claims it's a vapor leak, but Patricia says she can see people stopping there anyway, standing by the pump for minutes at a time before driving away without buying gas. Makes you wonder what they're really experiencing out there. Tonight's second tale comes from the Pacific Northwest, where the rain falls like judgment and the coffee flows like salvation. I received this one in my inbox around 3 a.m. last Saturday. Digital timestamp shows it was sent from a 76 station computer terminal in Seattle, Washington. The sender identifies herself only as Emily, and her message was accompanied by a single sentence in the subject line,
The things customers never say out loud. Emily's story is different from John's. Where his was about the mechanical, the industrial horror of equipment gone wrong, hers delves into something more intimate, more personal. The small transactions that make up a convenience store clerk's night, and what happens when those transactions evolve. Let me share her words with you.
Edward, I'm writing this on my break, sitting in the back office of the 76 station where I've worked for the past 2 years. It's 2:47 a.m., and I should be out front manning the register, but I needed a few minutes to process what just happened, what's been happening for weeks now. My name's Emily, I'm 25, and I work the graveyard shift at a gas station in the Ballard neighborhood of Seattle. It's not the worst job I've ever had. The pay's decent, benefits aren't terrible, and most of our late-night customers are regulars. Uber drivers grabbing energy drinks, hospital workers stopping for cigarettes on their way home, insomniacs buying ice cream and lottery tickets. The store itself is typical of these places. Rows of snacks and drinks, a hot food section that nobody trusts after midnight, lottery machines that sing their electronic siren songs to anyone with $2 and a dream. Behind the counter, there's the usual setup. Register, cigarette display, coffee machine that's been brewing the same pot since 1987. I thought I knew this place inside and out. Every beep of the scanner, every hum of the refrigeration units, every creak of the building settling. But about a month ago, things started changing in ways that made me question whether I really knew anything at all. It started with the beverages. We sell a lot of drinks during the night shift. Energy drinks, sodas, water bottles, sports drinks. People getting off work, staying up late, needing that caffeine fix or sugar rush. Standard stuff. I must scan 100 drink barcodes every shift. The first time I heard it, I thought it was just fatigue. Working nights messes with your head, makes you hear things that aren't there. I was scanning a can of Red Bull for a regular customer, guy named Marcus, who drives for one of the rideshare companies. Standard transaction, nothing unusual. But as the scanner beeped and the price appeared on the display, I heard something else. A voice, very quiet, almost like a whisper. "Make me less tired." I looked up at Marcus, thinking he'd said something, but he was just standing there checking his phone. Hadn't spoken a word since asking for the energy drink. "Did you say something?" I asked. "Nah, just waiting to pay." I shrugged it off, figured I was more exhausted than I'd realized. Finished the transaction, Marcus left, and I forgot about it. But it happened again the next night. Different customer, different drink, same phenomenon. This time, it was a woman buying a bottle of water, and as I scanned the barcode, I heard, "I'm so thirsty." Again, the customer hadn't said anything, just stood there waiting to pay, maybe scrolling through her phone. Over the next week, it became a pattern. Every time I scanned a beverage, I'd hear something. Not from the customer, from somewhere else. The voices were always quiet, always plaintive, always expressing some need related to the drink being purchased. Energy drinks, keep me awake. Sports drinks, I need strength. Sodas, make me feel better. Water, I'm so thirsty. At first I thought maybe it was some kind of psychological thing. You know, like when you're scanning items all night, your brain starts filling in the blanks, imagining what people might be thinking when they buy things. But the voices were too consistent, too specific, and they weren't coming from the customers. The breakthrough came 2 weeks ago. I was working alone. My supervisor had left early for a family emergency when a teenager came in around 1 a.m. Skinny kid, maybe 17, with that hollow-eyed look that comes from too many all-nighters. He grabbed a can of Monster energy drink from the cooler and brought it to the counter. As I reached for the scanner, I heard the voice before I even touched the barcode. "Help me stay awake, I'm so tired." But this time, the kid wasn't just standing there silently. He was talking on his phone, having an animated conversation with someone about a video game or something. Definitely not saying anything about being tired. That's when I realized the voices weren't coming from the customers. They were coming from the products themselves. I know how that sounds, Edward. Trust me, I know. But I started paying closer attention, and the pattern became undeniable. The voices weren't random. They corresponded exactly to what each product was supposed to do. Energy drinks talked about tiredness, sports drinks about needing strength, water about thirst, like the products themselves were aware, conscious of their purpose, their function, their reason for existing. The really unsettling part was how the voices sounded, not robotic or artificial, but human, real people expressing genuine need, genuine desperation. The energy drink voices always sounded exhausted, like someone fighting to stay awake after 36 hours with no sleep. The water voices sounded parched, like someone who'd been walking in the desert for days. I started documenting it, keeping a notebook where I'd write down what I heard and when. The pattern held consistent for over a week. Every beverage scan resulted in a voice expressing the exact need that product was meant to address. But last night, something changed. A regular customer came in around midnight, a woman named Janet, who works the night shift at the hospital. She's been coming here for months, usually buys a bottle of water and maybe some crackers. Nice lady, always polite. Sometimes we chat about the weather or the late-night news. Janet grabbed her usual water bottle and brought it to the counter. As I scanned the barcode, I expected to hear the familiar, "I'm so thirsty." Instead, I heard something that made my blood freeze. "Give me just one drink. Please, just one." The voice was different, not parched like the usual water voices, but desperate in a way that had nothing to do with thirst. It sounded like someone begging for alcohol, someone with a serious drinking problem pleading for just one more sip. I looked at the bottle in my hands, plain water, nothing else. But when I looked at the register display, something was wrong. Instead of the usual product description, Aquafina 16.9 Oz, the screen showed Scotch Whiskey 750 ml. I blinked, looked again, still showed whiskey. Janet was digging through her purse for money, oblivious to what I was seeing. I scanned the bottle again, thinking maybe the first scan had been a mistake. Same voice. "Please, just one drink, I need it so bad." Same display. Scotch Whiskey 700 ml. But it was clearly a water bottle. Clear plastic, clear liquid, Aquafina label. I completed the transaction, charged her for water, gave her the bottle. She left without incident, but I stood there for a long time afterward, staring at the register display, which had returned to normal as soon as the transaction finished. That's when I started wondering, what if the voices aren't coming from the products themselves? What if they're coming from somewhere else? Someone else? I did some research on our POS system the next day, asked our IT guy about the product database, how the scanner reads barcodes, what could cause display errors. He said the system was pretty standard, nothing unusual about it. But when I mentioned the wrong product showing up, he got this weird look on his face. "You mean like when you scan a candy bar and it comes up as cigarettes?" he asked. "Has that happened before?" "Few times over the past month. Other stores in the chain have reported similar glitches. Corporate's been trying to figure out the cause." "What do they think it is?" He shrugged. "Database corruption, maybe? or interference from cell towers. These old systems aren't great at handling wireless signals, but I don't think it's a technical glitch, Edward. I think something else is interfering with our scanning system, something that understands what people really want, not just what they're buying. Tonight, during my shift, I tested this theory. I scanned a bottle of water for myself. Didn't sell it, just scanned it to see what would happen. The voice I heard wasn't about thirst. It said, "Make the voices stop, please. Make them stop." And the display showed something that made me understand everything. Antipsychotic medication 30 millisource. I think whatever's affecting our register system can see into people's minds, Edward. It knows what we really need, what we're really seeking when we buy these things. The teenager buying energy drinks isn't just tired, he's fighting some deeper exhaustion, some spiritual fatigue that caffeine can't touch. Janet buying water isn't just thirsty. She's fighting an addiction, trying to fill a void with something harmless. And me? Apparently I'm losing my mind, and some part of me knows it. But here's the thing that really scares me. Tonight, when I was scanning items for customers, the voices changed again. Instead of expressing need, they started giving warnings. A man bought an energy drink, and the voice said, "This won't help. Your heart is already dying." A woman bought a diet soda, and the voice said, "The cancer is spreading. This won't slow it down." A teenager bought a sports drink, and the voice said, "You'll overdose next week. This won't give you the strength to stop." It's like whatever intelligence is speaking through our products can see the future, can see what these small purchases are leading to, what larger stories they're part of. Edward, I'm scared to go back to work tomorrow night, not because of the voices, I've gotten used to those, but because tonight, when I scanned that last bottle of water for myself, the voice said something different. "You're going to tell someone about this, and then they'll come for you." The display showed Witness Protection Services. I don't know who they are, but I think by sending you this email, I'm about to find out. If you don't hear from me again, you'll know why. Emily.
Emily, if you're listening tonight, I want you to know that your story arrived safely. More than that, it arrived with perfect timing. You see, after I read your email, I decided to do a little experiment of my own. I drove to my local gas station this morning, a Chevron about 10 minutes from the radio station, bought a simple bottle of water, paid attention to every sound, every detail of the transaction. The cashier was a young woman, maybe your age, and as she scanned my water bottle, I watched her face carefully. For just a moment, maybe 2 seconds, her expression changed, became confused, almost frightened. She looked at her register display, then at the water bottle, then back at the display. "Is everything okay?" I asked. "Yeah, sorry, sometimes our scanner acts up." She completed the transaction normally, but I caught a glimpse of her notepad beside the register. At the top of the page, in handwriting that looked hurried, almost frantic, were the words, "Make the voices stop." The thing about convenience stores, folks, is that they're designed to fulfill our immediate needs. Hunger, thirst, the sudden craving for something sweet or caffeinated. But Emily's story suggests that these simple transactions might be windows into much deeper hungers, needs that can't be satisfied by anything you can buy for $2.99. The medical examiner's office in King County reports that alcohol-related deaths among women aged 25 to 35 have increased by 23% in the past year. Drug overdoses among teenagers are at an all-time high. and cardiac events related to energy drink consumption have tripled in the Seattle area alone. Makes you wonder if those voices Emily's hearing aren't supernatural at all. Maybe they're just the truth we don't want to acknowledge, that our small purchases are symptoms of much larger problems, and sometimes the products we buy to help ourselves are actually killing us slowly. But there's something else about Emily's story that disturbs me. That final message about witness protection, about someone coming for her. Because as I was preparing tonight's show, I received a call from the district manager of a major gas station chain. Wouldn't say which one. He wanted to know if I'd heard anything about scanner irregularities at convenience stores. When I asked what he meant, he said several locations had reported employees documenting audio hallucinations related to their POS systems. Corporate was conducting an internal investigation, and anyone found discussing these incidents with outside parties would face immediate termination. Immediate termination for reporting technical glitches. The rain's picking up again outside my studio windows, washing the October night clean. But some stains don't wash away, do they? Some truths sink too deep to be cleansed by a simple shower. We've got more stories from the gas station graveyard shift coming your way. Tales of ATM shadows and messages written in frost, of footprints that appear where no one has walked. Each one a reminder that the most ordinary places can harbor the most extraordinary secrets. Emily, wherever you are, I hope you're safe. And I hope you know that sometimes the voices we hear are just our conscience trying to warn us before it's too late. The night is still young, night owls. Stay tuned, stay vigilant, and remember, sometimes the most dangerous transactions are the ones that seem perfectly normal. We'll be right back after this brief message from our friends at Midnight Fuel Coffee. When sleep is the enemy, and dawn feels like a distant dream. Good evening once again, creatures of the night. You're back with Edward Cronkite on WNMR, and that last song was Digital Ghost by Nox Arcana. Seemed appropriate for what we're about to explore. The clock on my studio wall shows 11:47 p.m., and I've got a fresh pot of coffee brewing because something tells me we're going to need the caffeine for this next tale. During the break, my phone lit up like a Christmas tree. Seems Emily's story about the talking products struck a chord with quite a few convenience store workers out there. A cashier from Portland called to say her scanner's been displaying random medication names for the past month. Another from Tampa mentioned hearing whispers every time she rings up alcohol, always the same voice saying, "Help me stop." But it's the email I received 20 minutes ago that's got my attention tonight. The sender claims to work for the same corporate entity that contacted me about Emily. Says there's been a containment protocol activated for anyone discussing these incidents publicly, that employees who've reported these experiences are being quietly transferred to different locations, different departments, different companies altogether. Makes you wonder what they're so desperate to keep quiet. Tonight's third story takes us to the humid heart of Florida, where the air is thick enough to swim through and the nights are filled with creatures that skitter and buzz and watch from the shadows. This one comes from Orlando, not the touristy part with the theme parks and manufactured magic, but the working-class neighborhoods where real people live real lives and sometimes encounter things that don't appear in any guidebook. The email arrived Tuesday morning from someone calling himself Michael, 28 years old, works as an ATM technician for a company that services banking machines at gas stations throughout Central Florida. His message was short, almost clinical in its precision, the kind of writing that comes from someone who's used to documenting technical problems and staying objective about what he observes. But there's nothing objective about what Michael observed last weekend. Let me share his account.
Edward, I'm not much for radio shows, but my girlfriend listens to yours sometimes when she can't sleep. She heard about your gas station theme this week and suggested I write to you about something that happened at one of my service calls. I maintain ATMs for a living. Not the most exciting job, but it pays well and I like the technical aspect of it. Most of my work involves routine maintenance, checking card readers, restocking cash, running diagnostics on the computer systems. I service about 40 machines throughout the Orlando area, mostly at gas stations and convenience stores. One of my regular stops is a BP station on Colonial Drive, east of downtown. It's in an older part of the city, surrounded by strip malls and apartment complexes that have seen better days. The station itself is nothing special. Standard layout, decent lighting, busy enough to keep the ATM active, but not so busy that there are lines. The ATM sits in a small alcove just inside the convenience store, positioned so you can access it without going through the main shopping area. It's a newer model, installed about 6 months ago, when the old one finally gave up the ghost. Standard features, color display, enhanced security camera, wireless connectivity for transaction processing. I service this machine every 2 weeks, usually during business hours. Quick in and out job, rarely takes more than 30 minutes. But last Friday I got an emergency call. The machine was showing error codes. Customers were complaining about failed transactions, and the manager wanted it fixed immediately. The problem was, it was almost midnight when I got the call. I normally don't do service calls that late, but this particular station is in a busy area, and a broken ATM on a Friday night means lost revenue for everyone involved. So I grabbed my tools and headed over. The place was relatively quiet when I arrived. A few customers pumping gas, 1 or 2 buying snacks inside. The night manager, a guy named Carlos, who I'd worked with before, let me into the ATM area and gave me the rundown. Machine had been acting up since around 10 p.m. Display flickering, card reader jamming, the works. I ran my initial diagnostics, and everything looked normal from a hardware perspective. The error log showed some unusual activity, but nothing that clearly indicated a mechanical problem. So I decided to check the internal camera system. Sometimes the security cameras can reveal issues that aren't obvious from the outside. Every ATM has multiple cameras, one facing outward to record customers during transactions, one pointing at the cash dispensing area, and usually 1 or 2 positioned to monitor the interior of the machine for security purposes. I pulled up the camera feeds on my laptop and started reviewing the footage from earlier that evening. The external camera showed normal activity. Customers approaching the machine, inserting cards, completing transactions, walking away. Nothing unusual there. The cash dispensing camera was clean too, no obstructions or mechanical issues visible. But the interior security camera, the one that monitors the inside of the ATM housing, showed something that made me stop the playback and rewind. At 10:17 p.m., right around the time the error codes started appearing, there was a figure visible in the background of the camera frame. The interior camera is positioned to watch the cash storage area and the main computer components, but it has a wide enough angle to capture part of the wall behind the machine. And on that wall, clear as day, was the shadow of a person. Not unusual by itself, the ATM is positioned near the store's entrance, so customer shadows falling across the camera frame happens all the time. But this shadow was different. It was the silhouette of a young woman, maybe in her 20s, wearing what looked like a dress or skirt. And she wasn't moving. Most shadows that appear in ATM camera feeds are transient, people walking by, shifting positions, coming and going. This one was stationary, like someone standing perfectly still directly behind the machine. I checked the timestamp against the external camera feed. At 10:17 p.m., no one was standing behind the ATM. The area was completely clear. But the interior camera clearly showed a female silhouette projected on the back wall of the machine housing. I fast-forwarded through the footage, watching the shadow. It remained in the same position for almost 20 minutes, never moving, never changing. Then, at 10:36 p.m., it simply vanished. One frame it was there, the next frame it was gone. That's also exactly when the ATM error code stopped appearing. I showed the footage to Carlos, thinking maybe he'd have an explanation. Perhaps there was a light source I wasn't aware of, or some kind of optical illusion caused by the store's fluorescent fixtures. Carlos watched the playback twice, then shook his head. "That's weird, man," he said. "But you know what's really weird? We had a girl die here about 6 months ago." He told me the story. A young woman in her early 20s, driving home from work around midnight. She'd stopped to use the ATM, the old one that was in the same position as the current machine. While she was completing her transaction, a drunk driver plowed through the front of the store, pinning her against the ATM. She died instantly. The drunk driver fled the scene and was never caught. She was wearing a white dress, Carlos said, like she'd been out somewhere nice. Real pretty girl. Name was Jennifer. I didn't know what to say to that, so I finished my diagnostics and prepared to leave. The machine was testing fine now, no error codes, all systems operational. Whatever had been causing the problems seemed to have resolved itself. But as I was packing up my equipment, I noticed something on the ATM's display screen. The machine was in standby mode, showing the standard welcome message and bank logo. But superimposed over the normal display, faint but visible, were words that shouldn't have been there. "Help me go home." I blinked, thinking maybe I was seeing reflections from the store's overhead lights, but the message was still there. Ghostly text overlaying the normal screen content. I called Carlos over to look, but by the time he reached the ATM, the display had returned to normal. Just the standard welcome screen, nothing else. "You sure you saw something?" he asked. I wasn't sure of anything anymore, but I took screenshots of my diagnostic software, documented the camera footage, and filed a standard service report. Technical issue resolved, cause unknown. I should have left it at that. Should have gone home, forgotten about the shadow and the message, chalked it up to fatigue and suggestion. But something about the whole situation bothered me. The precision of the timing, the way the errors stopped the moment the shadow disappeared, the message on the display that only I seemed to see. So I did something I probably shouldn't have done. I came back the next night. Saturday at midnight, I parked across the street from the BP station and watched the ATM area through binoculars. The store was busy, weekend night, lots of customers. I figured if there was some kind of optical illusion or light trick causing the shadow, I'd be able to see it from outside. For the first hour, nothing unusual happened. Customers came and went, used the ATM normally, no problems. I was starting to feel stupid for wasting my Saturday night when, at 1:14 a.m., I saw her, a young woman in a white dress, walking through the store entrance toward the ATM, even from across the street. I could see she was pretty, probably in her 20s with long dark hair. She moved with purpose, like someone who knew exactly where she was going. She approached the ATM and stopped in front of it, but she didn't insert a card or touch the screen. She just stood there, perfectly still. for maybe 30 seconds. Then she turned around and walked directly toward the back wall of the ATM alcove, and instead of stopping when she reached the wall, she kept walking, right through it. I watched through the binoculars as her white dress disappeared into the wall behind the ATM like she was walking through solid matter. A few seconds later, I saw customers inside the store looking around with confused expressions, like they'd heard something but couldn't identify what. I got out of my car and walked over to the store. The ATM was functioning normally, no error codes on the display. I asked the night clerk if anything unusual had happened. "Weird you should ask," he said. "About 5 minutes ago, the ATM started making this noise, like someone tapping on it from the inside, lasted maybe 20 seconds, then stopped." I checked my laptop, remotely accessing the ATM's camera system. The interior security camera showed the same female shadow on the back wall, in exactly the same position as the night before, and the timestamp showed 1:14 a.m., the exact moment I'd seen the woman in the white dress walk through the wall. "Edward, I've been an ATM technician for 6 years. I understand how these machines work, how their cameras function, how light and shadow interact with electronic imaging systems. What I saw that night doesn't fit into any technical explanation I can think of. But it fits perfectly with Carlos's story about Jennifer, the young woman who died at the old ATM 6 months ago. I think she's still trying to complete her transaction. Still trying to get the money she needed that night, still trying to go home. But she doesn't understand that the machine has been replaced, that the physical layout has changed. She keeps walking through the back wall because that's where the old ATM used to be. That's where she remembers it being. I haven't been back to service that machine since Saturday night. I've asked my supervisor to reassign that location to someone else. Told him I have a scheduling conflict. But I keep thinking about Jennifer, trapped in a loop, trying to access an ATM that no longer exists, trying to go home to a life that ended 6 months ago. The really disturbing part? Yesterday I got a call about another ATM acting up. Different station, same area of Orlando. The manager mentioned that a young woman had been killed in a car accident nearby about a year ago. I'm starting to think this isn't an isolated incident, Michael.
Michael, I want to thank you for sharing this with us, and I want you to know that your technical expertise makes your account particularly compelling. The fact that you documented everything, approached the situation methodically, and still came away with no rational explanation, that carries weight. After reading your email, I reached out to the Orlando Police Department and confirmed the details about Jennifer's death. 23 years old, marketing coordinator at a local firm, killed by a drunk driver who was never apprehended. She'd been out celebrating a co-worker's birthday that night, which explains the white dress. The investigating officer mentioned something interesting. Jennifer's bank records showed she'd been trying to withdraw money to pay for a taxi home. Her friends had all left earlier, and she didn't want to drive after drinking. The ATM transaction never completed because the machine was destroyed in the crash. So she's still there, still trying to get the money she needs to go home safely, still trying to make the responsible choice that might have saved her life. But here's what troubles me about your story, Michael. That second incident you mentioned, the other ATM in the same area. I made some calls, and it turns out there have been 17 ATM malfunctions in Central Florida over the past year, all at locations near traffic fatalities involving young women. The bank that owns most of these machines has a policy of replacing ATMs after traumatic incidents. But apparently, they're not taking into account that the trauma might follow the function, not the physical machine. Makes you wonder how many of our everyday technologies are haunted by the people who died trying to use them. How many cell phones carry the last words of accident victims? How many computers hold the final emails of people who didn't make it home? The October wind is picking up again outside my studio, rattling the windows like restless spirits trying to get in. October has always been a thin month when the boundary between the living and the dead becomes permeable as tissue paper. Jennifer isn't the only one trapped in a loop trying to complete unfinished business. We've got more stories coming from the gas station night shift, tales of refrigerated whispers and neon hearts, of footprints that appear in impossible places. Each one a reminder that some transactions can never be completed, no matter how many times we try. Michael, if you're listening, I hope you'll reconsider avoiding that ATM. Sometimes the best way to help the dead move on is to acknowledge their presence, to let them know they've been seen. Jennifer just wants to go home. Maybe all she needs is someone to tell her it's okay to stop trying. The night grows deeper, my friends. Stay with us as we explore more mysteries from the fluorescent-lit frontier where the ordinary and the impossible intersect. We'll return after this message from Quantum Security Systems, protecting your transactions in this world and the next. The witching hour approaches, restless souls. This is Edward Cronkite with you on WNMR, Nocturnal Mysteries Radio, where the coffee runs strong and the stories run deeper. That haunting melody you just heard was Fractured Memories by Midnight Syndicate, and it seems particularly fitting as we delve into our fourth tale from the gas station graveyard shift. Before we continue, I need to address something that's been weighing on my mind since we started tonight's program. During our last break, I received a call from someone claiming to be a legal representative for a major petroleum company. They wanted to discuss what they called defamatory content regarding their business establishments. When I asked for specifics, they mentioned stories about alleged supernatural incidents that could damage the reputation of gas station franchises. I told them the same thing I'm telling you now. These are real accounts from real people. And the truth isn't defamatory. It's just uncomfortable. The fact that corporate lawyers are paying attention to a small market radio show tells me we're touching nerves that run deeper than anyone wants to admit. Our fourth story takes us to Detroit, Michigan, where the autumn wind cuts through the urban landscape like broken glass, and the nights carry the weight of a city that's seen both glory and decay. This account comes from Jessica, a 26-year-old woman who works the overnight shift at a marathon station on the city's east side. Jessica's email arrived Sunday evening, sent from what appears to be a library computer terminal. The metadata shows it was composed over several hours, with multiple drafts saved and deleted before the final version was sent. That kind of hesitation tells me she was wrestling with whether to share her experience at all. What finally convinced her to reach out was something that happened 3 nights ago, something that made her realize she wasn't just dealing with stress or fatigue, but with something far more complex and deeply personal. Here's what Jessica shared.
Mr. Cronkite, I've been putting off writing this email for 2 weeks, but after what happened Thursday night, I can't keep it to myself anymore. I need someone to hear this, someone who might understand that not everything that happens in the world has a logical explanation. My name is Jessica, and I work the overnight shift at a marathon gas station in Detroit. It's not the kind of neighborhood you'd choose to work in if you had better options, but the pay is decent, and jobs are hard to come by around here. The station sits on a corner that's seen better days. Most of the surrounding businesses are closed or barely hanging on, and the streetlights have that flickering quality that makes everything look like a scene from a horror movie. I've been working this job for about 8 months now. The routine is pretty standard. stock shelves, man the register, keep the coffee fresh, and manage the hot food section. We've got one of those roller grills for hot dogs, a nacho cheese dispenser, and a small selection of pre-made sandwiches and burritos in heated display cases. But the real moneymaker is our beverage section. We've got 3 large coolers along the back wall filled with sodas, energy drinks, water, and beer. The coolers are relatively new, installed about 6 months ago when the previous owner sold to Marathon. Glass doors, LED lighting, digital temperature controls, top-of-the-line equipment for a neighborhood station. The middle cooler is the one that's been giving me problems. It started about a month ago with temperature fluctuations. The digital display would show the correct temperature, around 38 degrees, but the drinks inside would be room temperature or even warm. I'd call our maintenance contractor. He'd come out and run diagnostics, but everything would test normal. By the time he left, the cooler would be working fine again. This happened 4 or 5 times before I started noticing a pattern. The temperature problems only occurred during my shift, usually between 2 and 4 a.m., and they always coincided with this strange condensation that would form on the inside of the glass door. Not unusual by itself, coolers develop condensation all the time, especially when there's humidity in the air. But this condensation was different. Instead of forming random patterns on the glass, it would collect in very specific areas, creating shapes that almost looked intentional. At first, I thought it was just my imagination. You work enough overnight shifts, your mind starts playing tricks on you, making you see patterns where none exist. But after a week of watching this happen, I started taking pictures with my phone. The condensation always formed the same basic pattern, a series of curved lines that looked almost like handwriting. Not clear enough to read, but definitely more organized than random moisture should be. I showed the pictures to my supervisor, Maria, thinking maybe there was a problem with the cooler's ventilation system that was causing unusual air currents. She looked at the photos, frowned, and said she'd have maintenance take another look. But when the maintenance guy came out the next day, the cooler was working perfectly. No temperature issues, no unusual condensation, nothing out of the ordinary. That's when I started paying closer attention. Last Thursday night, around 2:30 a.m., I was restocking the beer in the middle cooler when I heard something that made me freeze. A voice, very quiet, coming from inside the cooler. "Excuse me, miss?" I looked around the store. No customers, no one else in the building, just me and the hum of the refrigeration units. "Hello?" I called out, thinking maybe someone had come in and I'd missed the door chime. No response. I went back to stocking beer, and about 30 seconds later I heard it again. "Miss, could you help me?" This time I was certain the voice was coming from inside the cooler. Not from behind it or near it, but from inside, like someone was trapped in there with the drinks. I opened the glass door and stuck my head inside, looking for any kind of intercom or speaker that might explain the voice. Nothing. Just shelves of cold beverages and that chemical smell that comes from industrial refrigeration. But as I was pulling my head out of the cooler, I saw something that made my heart stop. On the inside of the glass door, written in what looked like fresh condensation, were the words, "Can I have just one drink?" Clear as day, like someone had traced the letters with their finger in the moisture on the glass. But I'd just opened that door seconds before, and there hadn't been any writing on it. I stepped back, staring at the message. As I watched, more condensation began forming beneath the first line, slowly spelling out additional words. "Please, I'm so thirsty." The letters appeared gradually, like an invisible finger was writing them in real time. Each word took maybe 10 seconds to form completely, the moisture collecting in precise lines that spelled out the message. I grabbed my phone and started recording, but the moment I pointed the camera at the door, the condensation began to dissipate. Within seconds, the glass was clear again, showing no trace of the writing. I stood there for a long time, staring at that cooler door, trying to convince myself I'd imagined the whole thing, but I knew what I'd seen. Someone, or something, had been communicating with me through condensation on a refrigerator door. The next night, I was ready for it. I set up my phone to record the entire cooler area, starting around 2 a.m. when the incidents usually occurred. I also brought a notebook to document any voices or messages I encountered. At 2:17 a.m., the voice returned. "Miss, are you there?" I responded out loud, "Yes, I'm here. What do you need?" "I'm so thirsty. Could I please have something to drink?" "Who are you?" I asked. The condensation on the door began forming words again. "My name is Carol. I used to come here." "Used to come here when?" "Before I got sick. Before they said I couldn't anymore." I thought about this for a moment. What kind of sickness? The writing appeared more slowly this time, like whoever was forming the letters was struggling. Liver disease. From drinking too much. That's when I understood. Carol wasn't asking for a beverage because she was thirsty in any normal sense. She was asking for alcohol because she was still fighting an addiction that had apparently followed her beyond death. "I can't give you alcohol, Carol," I said. "It's what made you sick." "I know," appeared on the glass, "but I'm so thirsty." The desperation in those words was heartbreaking. Even written in condensation on a cooler door, I could feel the anguish behind them. "What if I got you some water instead?" I suggested. "Water doesn't help. Nothing helps." I stood there trying to think of what to say to a dead alcoholic who was haunting my refrigerator. It's not exactly a situation they prepare you for in customer service training. "Carol, how did you die?" The writing stopped for almost a minute. Then, slowly, "Liver failure. At the hospital. Alone." "When?" "6 months ago, in April." I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the open cooler door. April was when Marathon had bought this station from the previous owner. April was when they'd installed the new refrigeration units. "Did you used to buy alcohol here when it was the old store?" "Every day, for 15 years. Ruined my life." "Then why do you want more?" "Because it's all I know how to want." That answer hit me harder than I expected. Carol wasn't haunting the cooler because she wanted to keep drinking. She was haunting it because addiction had become so central to her identity that she didn't know how to exist without it, even in death. "Carol, you don't have to keep wanting that," I said. "You're free now. You can want something else." "Like what?" I thought about it. "Peace, rest, freedom from craving things that hurt you." The condensation on the door began forming new words, but very slowly, like the letters were difficult to create. "I don't remember how to want those things." "That's okay," I told her. "You can learn. Will you help me?" I looked at this message written by a dead woman in the moisture on a refrigerator door, and I realized I was being asked to be something between a counselor and an exorcist. "I'll try," I said. For the next 3 nights, Carol and I had conversations through the condensation writing. I learned that she'd been a secretary at an insurance company, that she'd started drinking after her husband left her, that she'd lost her job and her apartment, and ended up buying cheap wine with food stamps at this same gas station. She told me about the loneliness, about the way alcohol had slowly replaced every other relationship in her life, about waking up in the hospital with liver failure, realizing she was going to die alone because she'd driven away everyone who'd tried to help her. But she also told me about small moments of happiness, walks in the park, conversations with strangers, the taste of coffee on Sunday mornings before the craving got too strong. I started encouraging her to focus on those memories instead of the alcohol. When she'd ask for a drink, I'd ask her to tell me about something she'd enjoyed when she was sober. Gradually, the messages on the cooler door changed. Instead of, "I'm so thirsty," she'd write, "I remember feeding ducks at the pond." Instead of begging for alcohol, she'd share memories of her sister, her first job, the garden she'd kept before the drinking got bad. Last Thursday night was the last time I heard from Carol. She wrote one final message on the cooler door. "Thank you for helping me remember who I was before." Then the condensation faded, and the voice didn't return. The cooler's been working normally ever since. No temperature fluctuations, no unusual condensation, no mysterious voices. I think Carol finally found her way to whatever comes after. I hope she did anyway. Mr. Cronkite, I'm telling you this story because I think people need to know that addiction doesn't always end with death. Sometimes it follows us beyond the grave, trapping us in cycles of want and need that feel impossible to break. But I also think love and compassion can reach across that boundary. Sometimes all a lost soul needs is someone willing to listen, to remember them as more than their disease. Carol taught me that even ghosts can heal if someone cares enough to help them remember who they really are. Thank you for reading this. I hope it helps someone, somewhere. Jessica.
Jessica, your story touches something deep in the human experience. The way our deepest struggles can define us so completely that they follow us beyond death itself. The compassion you showed Carol, the patience to help her rediscover herself beyond her addiction, that's a kind of ministry that doesn't require ordination or training, just humanity. I contacted the Wayne County Medical Examiner's Office and confirmed that a woman named Carol Reeves died of liver failure at Detroit Medical Center in April. She was 52 years old, no surviving family, found dead in her apartment 3 days after passing. The preliminary investigation showed she'd been a regular customer at several local establishments where alcohol was sold. What strikes me about your account, Jessica, is how it illustrates something we rarely discuss. The way addiction can become so central to someone's identity that recovery feels like losing themselves. Carol's struggle continued after death because she literally didn't know how to exist without the want, without the craving that had defined her for 15 years. But your intervention, helping her remember who she was before alcohol consumed her life, that's exactly what addiction counselors try to do with living patients. You provided something Carol had never experienced in life: unconditional support from someone who saw her as more than her disease. The Michigan Department of Health reports that alcohol-related deaths have increased by 37% over the past 5 years, with liver disease being the leading cause. What they don't report is how many of those deaths occur in isolation, how many people die without anyone to remember them as they were before addiction took hold. Maybe that's what Carol really needed. Not alcohol, but acknowledgement of her full humanity. The wind outside my studio has died down to a whisper, like the night itself is holding its breath. October nights in radio stations have always felt thin to me, like the boundary between signal and static becomes permeable, allowing voices from elsewhere to slip through. We've got more stories from the overnight shift ahead. tales of mysterious footprints and neon omens, of voices calling from beneath the floorboards, each one a reminder that the places where we conduct our most ordinary business can also be sanctuaries for the extraordinary, the unexplained, the achingly human. Jessica, if you're listening, I want you to know that what you did for Carol was profound. In a world that often treats addiction as a moral failing rather than a medical condition, you offered something revolutionary: dignity and hope. The night deepens around us, but sometimes the darkness is where we find our greatest capacity for light. Stay with us, night wanderers. The stories are just beginning, and every voice deserves to be heard. We'll return after this message from Riverside Recovery Center, because healing is possible in this life and beyond. Welcome back to the Depths of Night, fellow insomniacs. Edward Cronkite here with you on WNMR, Nocturnal Mysteries Radio, where we explore the shadows that daylight prefers to ignore. The studio clock shows 12:34 a.m., and I've just finished reading through a stack of emails that arrived during our last segment. Seems Jessica's story about Carol has resonated deeply with our listeners. I've received 17 messages from people sharing their own experiences with addiction, loss, and the thin spaces where the living try to communicate with those who've passed on. One message in particular caught my attention. It's from a substance abuse counselor in Detroit who says she's going to start incorporating Jessica's approach into her own practice. The idea of helping clients remember who they were before addiction defined them. Sometimes the most profound healing comes from the most unexpected sources, but tonight's journey into the fluorescent-lit frontier takes us west, to Denver, Colorado, where the thin mountain air carries whispers from both the living and the dead. This account comes from David, a 32-year-old man who manages hazardous materials storage for a Valero station that serves as a hub for long-haul truckers traveling through the Rockies. David's email arrived with an unusual attachment, a series of photographs taken with what appears to be a thermal imaging device. The subject line was simply, "Things that shouldn't be warm." When I opened the images, I understood why he'd chosen those words. Let me share David's account, and then we'll explore what those thermal readings might mean.
Edward, I'm not sure how to begin this, so I'll start with the facts and let you draw your own conclusions. I work as a hazardous materials supervisor for a Valero station on I-70 west of Denver. It's one of the larger truck stops in the area, 48 pumps, a full-service restaurant, and extensive facilities for commercial vehicles. Part of my job involves managing the storage and disposal of industrial chemicals used for equipment maintenance, spill cleanup, and emergency response. We keep these chemicals in a secure storage facility behind the main building, a windowless concrete structure about the size of a two-car garage. The space is divided into sections based on chemical compatibility, with proper ventilation systems and temperature controls to prevent dangerous reactions. Most of what we store is standard industrial stuff: degreasing solvents, acid neutralizers, hydraulic fluids, cleaning compounds. But we also keep a supply of more specialized chemicals for emergency situations. Things like amarga acid for pipeline cleaning, industrial-strength disinfectants, and various compounds used in environmental cleanup. I've been managing this facility for 4 years, and I know every chemical we store, every safety protocol, every regulation that applies to our operation. I take this responsibility seriously because one mistake with these substances could kill someone or contaminate the entire area. 3 weeks ago, I started noticing irregularities during my evening inspections. The chemical storage facility is kept locked at all times, with access controlled by both a key card system and a physical deadbolt. Only 3 people have access: myself, my assistant supervisor, and the station manager. We keep detailed logs of who enters when and why. The irregularities started small. I'd arrive for my evening inspection and find containers that had been moved slightly from where I'd left them. Not enough to suggest theft or tampering, just small shifts in position. A jug of degreaser turned 90 degrees, a container of acid neutralizer moved 6 inches to the left. At first, I assumed my assistant was being careless during his morning checks. I mentioned it to him, and he swore he hadn't moved anything. I checked the access logs, and they showed no entries between my evening inspection and his morning visit. I decided to start taking photographs of the storage areas before leaving each night, so I could compare them to what I found the next day. That's when the pattern became undeniable. Every night, items in the amarga acid section would be rearranged, not random movements, specific purposeful reorganization. Containers would be lined up in perfect rows, labels facing outward, arranged by size from smallest to largest. Amarga acid is nasty stuff, highly corrosive, toxic if inhaled, requires special handling and disposal procedures. We keep it in a separate section with extra ventilation and containment systems. It's not something you'd casually reorganize for aesthetic reasons. I started staying later to observe the storage area, thinking maybe there was some kind of seismic activity or structural settling that was causing the movements, but the storage facility sits on a concrete foundation, and none of the other chemical sections showed any disturbance. 2 weeks ago, I installed a motion-activated security camera focused on the amarga acid section. The camera was set to record whenever it detected movement, with infrared capability for night vision. The recordings showed exactly what I expected to see: an empty storage room with no movement, no disturbance, nothing that would explain the container rearrangements. But when I compared the footage to my before and after photographs, the discrepancy was clear. Containers were being moved during periods when the camera recorded no motion at all. That's when I decided to stay overnight and monitor the storage facility in person. Last Friday night, I set up in the main building with a clear view of the storage facility door. I had my thermal imaging device, standard equipment for checking chemical leaks, and a clear line of sight to the facility entrance. At 2:47 a.m., I heard it for the first time, a rhythmic knocking sound coming from inside the storage building. Not random banging or shifting containers, deliberate knocking like someone tapping on metal with their knuckles. 3 short knocks, pause, 3 short knocks, pause, over and over. I grabbed my thermal imager and headed for the storage facility, but the knocking stopped the moment I started walking toward it. I unlocked the door and conducted a full inspection of the amarga acid section. Everything was in perfect order. Containers lined up, labels facing out, arranged by size. But according to my photographs from earlier that evening, I'd left them in their normal scattered arrangement. I returned to my observation post and waited. 20 minutes later, the knocking started again. This time I used the thermal imager to scan the storage building from outside. Most of the interior showed the expected cool blue readings: concrete walls, metal containers, ambient air temperature around 45 degrees. But the amarga acid section was showing heat signatures, not the containers themselves, but the space around them. Areas of warmth that corresponded roughly to human body temperature, moving in patterns that suggested someone walking between the chemical storage racks. I have the thermal images attached to this email. You can see for yourself. Clear humanoid heat signatures in a locked, empty storage facility. The knocking continued for about 10 minutes, always with the same rhythm. 3 knocks, pause, 3 knocks, pause. During this time, the thermal readings showed consistent movement in the amarga acid section, like someone methodically working their way through the containers. When the knocking stopped, the heat signatures faded and the thermal readings returned to normal. I waited until dawn before entering the storage facility again. The amarga acid section had been completely reorganized. Not just the containers, but the storage racks themselves had been adjusted to create more space between each chemical type. The work would have taken hours to complete, and it was done with obvious expertise in chemical storage procedures. Whoever or whatever was in there knows exactly how hazardous materials should be stored. I started researching the history of our location, thinking maybe there had been an industrial accident or chemical spill that could explain the activity. What I found was more disturbing than I'd expected. Before Valero built the current facility, the land was occupied by a small chemical processing plant called Rocky Mountain Industrial Solutions. The plant operated from 1978 to 2003, when it was shut down after a series of safety violations and environmental violations. According to EPA records, the plant had significant problems with amarga acid storage throughout its operation. Improper handling led to several chemical burns among workers, and inadequate containment systems caused soil contamination that required extensive cleanup. One of the most tragic incidents occurred in 1989 when a worker named Marcus Webb, a 38-year-old chemical handler, was killed when a container of amarga acid ruptured during routine maintenance. The accident report indicates that Webb had repeatedly filed safety complaints about acid storage procedures, but management had ignored his warnings. Webb died alone on a Friday night, working overtime to reorganize the chemical storage area according to proper safety standards. He was trying to prevent exactly the kind of accident that ended up killing him. The EPA report notes that Webb was found surrounded by properly arranged chemical containers. He'd managed to reorganize most of the storage area before the fatal accident occurred. Edward, I think Marcus Webb is still trying to finish the job he started 35 years ago, still trying to properly organize chemical storage to prevent accidents and injuries. The thermal signatures I'm recording match the patterns you'd expect from someone methodically arranging chemical containers according to safety protocols. The knocking sounds like someone checking container integrity. Tap, 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 to test for structural weakness. Yesterday, I made a decision that might sound crazy, but it felt right. I left a note in the amarga acid section addressed to Marcus Webb. I thanked him for his safety consciousness and told him that current regulations require professional hazmat handlers to manage chemical storage. I explained that while I appreciated his concern, the facility was now being maintained according to proper safety standards. I told him it was okay to rest, that the chemicals were safe, that no one else would be hurt by improper storage procedures. Last night was the first night in 3 weeks that I didn't hear knocking from the storage facility. This morning, I found my note exactly where I'd left it, but something, had written a response in what appears to be industrial marking chalk. Thank you. Please keep them safe. The handwriting matches Marcus Webb's signature on the old EPA safety complaints. Edward, I'm not asking you to believe this story. I'm just sharing it because I think Marcus Webb deserves recognition for the dedication that cost him his life and that continues even after death. Some people are so committed to protecting others that not even death can stop them from doing their job. The attached thermal images speak for themselves. David, those thermal images are remarkable. Clear evidence of organized heat patterns in what should be an empty space.
But what's even more remarkable is your response to the situation. Recognizing Marcus Webb's continuing dedication and formally relieving him of duty, that shows a level of professional courtesy that transcends the boundary between life and death. I contacted the EPA region office in Denver and confirmed the details about Rocky Mountain Industrial Solutions. Marcus Webb was indeed killed in an Amarga acid accident in 1989, and the safety complaints he filed were detailed and prescient. He'd predicted almost exactly the type of failure that eventually killed him. The EPA investigator who handled the case mentioned something interesting. Webb had been working overtime without authorization, trying to implement safety improvements that management had refused to fund. He died because he cared more about worker safety than following company policies. What strikes me about your story, David, is how it illustrates the persistence of professional responsibility. Marcus Webb isn't haunting that chemical storage facility out of anger or unfinished personal business. He's there because someone has to ensure proper safety protocols are followed. In life, he was ignored by management who prioritized profits over worker safety. In death, he finally found someone who recognized his expertise and treated him with the professional respect he'd never received while alive. The Occupational Safety and Health Administration reports that chemical-related workplace fatalities have decreased by 60% since the 1990s, largely due to improved storage and handling procedures. Marcus Webb's death contributed to those improvements. The safety standards you follow today exist partly because of his sacrifice. Maybe that's why he could finally rest when you acknowledged his service and assured him the chemicals were in capable hands. Sometimes recognition and respect are all a dedicated professional needs to move on. The high mountain air is still tonight, carrying sounds further than they should travel. October in Colorado has always felt thin to me, like the altitude makes everything more permeable, the boundary between worlds, the distinction between the living and the dead, the difference between dedication and obsession. We've got more tales from the overnight shift coming your way, stories of neon prophecies and underground voices, of customers who appear in places where no customer should be, each one a reminder that some callings run so deep they transcend the physical realm. David, if you're listening, I hope you know that what you did for Marcus Webb was profound. In a world where worker safety is often treated as an inconvenience, you honored a man who died trying to protect his colleagues. Professional respect shouldn't end with death, and thanks to you, Marcus Webb finally received the recognition he deserved. The October night grows deeper, but some vigils are eternal. Stay with us as we continue our exploration of the places where duty and devotion intersect with the mysterious. We'll return after this message from Mountain State Safety Equipment, because proper protection saves lives in every dimension of existence. The small hours stretch before us like an unwritten page. Night travelers. You're listening to WNMR, Nocturnal Mysteries Radio, and I'm Edward Cronkite, your companion through the darker territories of human experience. That was Pulse by Atrium Carcery, and the rhythmic quality seems particularly fitting for tonight's next tale. Before we continue, I want to share something that happened during our last break. A listener called in, wouldn't give his name, but said he was a former EPA investigator. He confirmed every detail of David's story about Marcus Webb and added something that didn't make it into the official reports. Webb's wife had left him 6 months before his death, saying she couldn't handle his obsession with workplace safety. She called it pathological, said he cared more about preventing accidents than living his own life. Makes you wonder if dedication becomes haunting when it's the only relationship that survives death. Our sixth story takes us to Austin, Texas, where the music flows like water and the nights pulse with the rhythm of a city that never quite settles into sleep. This account comes from Laura, a 29-year-old woman who works a specialized position at a Conoco station that serves as a refueling hub for commercial vehicles traveling between Houston and Dallas. Laura's job involves operating a mobile fuel delivery system, essentially a golf cart equipped with pump equipment that allows her to bring fuel directly to trucks parked in the facility's expansive lot. It's physically demanding work, requiring her to maneuver the cart between rows of massive vehicles in conditions that range from scorching heat to torrential rain. Her email arrived Tuesday morning, sent from what appears to be a truck stop computer terminal. The timestamp shows 4:23 a.m., and the message carries the weight of someone who's witnessed something that challenged everything she thought she understood about the intersection of technology and mortality. Here's Laura's account.
Mr. Cronkite, I've been listening to your program for about a year now, usually during my breaks at work. Never thought I'd have a story worth sharing, but after what's been happening over the past month, I can't keep this to myself anymore. I work at a Conoco truck stop in Austin, operating what we call the mobile fuel delivery system. Instead of requiring drivers to maneuver their big rigs to individual pumps, I bring the fuel to them using a specialized golf cart equipped with pump equipment and electronic payment processing. The job keeps me moving all night, circulating through the truck parking area, topping off tanks, processing payments, checking tire pressure and fluid levels for drivers who request it. It's good work, steady pay, and I like the independence of being out on the lot instead of stuck behind a counter. The truck parking area covers about 6 acres, organized in rows that can accommodate up to 80 commercial vehicles. We've got overhead lighting throughout the lot, a combination of traditional floodlights and newer LED fixtures that were installed about 8 months ago as part of an energy efficiency upgrade. The LED lights cast this clean, bright white light that's supposed to improve visibility and safety. But there's something about the quality of LED illumination that makes everything look slightly artificial, like you're living inside a computer simulation. About a month ago, I started noticing something odd about the way the LED lights reflected off the asphalt. Most pavement reflections are straightforward. You see the shape of the light fixture mirrored in the surface, maybe distorted by oil stains or water puddles. But in certain areas of the lot, the LED reflections were forming patterns that didn't correspond to the actual shape of the light fixtures. Specifically, they were forming heart shapes. Not random patterns that might look like hearts if you squinted and used your imagination. Clear, symmetrical heart shapes reflected in the asphalt, glowing with that cold LED white light. The first time I noticed it, I was refueling a truck in Section C around 2 a.m. As I was connecting the fuel nozzle, I glanced down and saw a perfect heart-shaped reflection on the pavement about 3 feet from where I was standing. I looked up at the light fixture directly overhead, a standard rectangular LED array, nothing that should cast a heart-shaped reflection. But when I looked back down, the heart was still there, clearly defined and glowing steadily. I moved to a different position, thinking maybe it was an optical illusion caused by the angle of my viewing. The heart reflection moved with me, staying approximately 3 feet away no matter where I positioned myself. This happened several more times over the next week, always in different sections of the lot, always when I was refueling trucks late at night. The heart-shaped reflections would appear during the fueling process, remain visible for the duration of my work, then fade when I moved on to the next vehicle. I started documenting these incidents, taking photos with my phone whenever the reflections appeared. But every time I tried to capture them, the camera showed only normal pavement reflections. The heart shapes were visible to my naked eye, but wouldn't register in photographs. 2 weeks ago, the visual phenomenon evolved into something more disturbing. I was refueling a truck in Section D around 3:30 a.m. when the familiar heart-shaped reflection appeared on the pavement. But this time, I heard something in addition to seeing the light pattern. A heartbeat. Not my own heartbeat. I know the sound and rhythm of my own cardiovascular system. This was different, slower, weaker, irregular. The kind of heartbeat you might hear through a stethoscope when examining someone with serious cardiac problems. The sound seemed to be coming from the pavement itself, like the asphalt was alive and struggling to pump blood through damaged arteries. I knelt down and pressed my ear to the ground, thinking maybe I was hearing vibrations from underground pipes or electrical systems, but the heartbeat was unmistakably organic. Lub-dub, lub-dub, pause, lub-dub, pause, lub-dub. Each beat corresponded to a pulse of brightness in the heart-shaped reflection, like the light was being powered by whatever cardiac rhythm I was hearing. This continued for about 10 minutes, then gradually faded as I completed the fueling process and moved on to the next truck. I mentioned the experience to my supervisor, thinking maybe there was some kind of electrical interference or underground utility issue that could explain both the unusual reflections and the rhythmic sounds. He looked at me like I'd suggested the pavement was haunted, but agreed to have the maintenance crew check for electrical problems in Section D. They found nothing. No faulty wiring, no underground utilities that could create vibrations. No explanation for either the visual or auditory phenomena I'd reported. But the night after the maintenance inspection, things escalated. I was working in Section F around 2 a.m. when multiple heart-shaped reflections appeared simultaneously throughout the truck parking area. Not just one or two, but dozens of them, scattered across the asphalt like a constellation of cardiac distress. And with them came the sound of multiple heartbeats, overlapping and out of sync, creating a chaotic symphony of struggling cardiovascular systems. Some beats were rapid and panicky, like someone experiencing a heart attack. Others were slow and labored, like someone in the final stages of heart failure. A few were completely irregular, skipping beats and racing in patterns that suggested serious arrhythmia. I stood in the middle of the parking lot, surrounded by glowing heart shapes and the sound of dying hearts, trying to understand what I was experiencing. That's when I realized the heartbeats weren't random. They were corresponding to specific trucks in the lot. The rapid, panicky heartbeat was coming from beneath a truck whose driver I'd met earlier, a man in his 50s who'd mentioned chest pains and said he was planning to see a doctor when he got home to Oklahoma. The slow, labored rhythm was emanating from near a truck operated by an elderly driver who'd been coughing constantly and complained about feeling weak and dizzy. The irregular heartbeat was centered around a truck whose driver was a woman in her 40s who'd been taking nitroglycerin tablets while I was fueling her vehicle. Mr. Cronkite, I think the pavement was showing me the cardiac health of every driver in the lot. The heart-shaped reflections weren't random light patterns. They were diagnostic readings, medical information displayed through some impossible intersection of LED technology and human physiology. But here's what really disturbed me. One section of the lot showed no heart reflection at all, just darkness where the light should have been. That area corresponded to a truck whose driver hadn't responded when I'd knocked on his sleeper cab earlier that evening. I'd assumed he was sleeping deeply and hadn't wanted to disturb him. When the sun came up and he still hadn't emerged from his truck, my supervisor called for a welfare check. The driver had died in his sleep of a massive heart attack, probably around the time I was first noticing the absence of a heart-shaped reflection beneath his vehicle. The pavement had been showing me that his heart had already stopped. Since that night, I've been paying closer attention to the heart reflections and their corresponding sounds. What I've discovered is that they're not just diagnostic, they're predictive. Drivers whose reflections show irregular patterns invariably mention cardiac symptoms within a day or two of my observations. Those with weak, labored heartbeat sounds consistently report fatigue, chest pain, or breathing problems. 3 drivers whose trucks showed fading heart reflections have been hospitalized for cardiac events within a week of my seeing the warning signs. I've tried to warn people, but how do you tell a truck driver that the pavement under his vehicle is indicating he's having heart problems? How do you explain that LED lights are somehow conducting cardiac diagnostics through asphalt reflection? Most people think I'm either crazy or trying to run some kind of scam. But last week I made a decision that might have saved a life. A driver in his 30s, healthy-looking guy, parked in Section B around midnight. When I went to fuel his truck, the heart reflection beneath his vehicle was rapid and chaotic, and the corresponding heartbeat sound was erratic and alarming. He looked fine, said he felt fine, had no history of cardiac problems, but the pavement was screaming that something was seriously wrong. I convinced him to let me call 911, told him I had a feeling he should be checked by paramedics. He was reluctant, but agreed when I offered to pay for the ambulance if it turned out to be unnecessary. The paramedics arrived and ran an EKG. The driver was in the early stages of a massive heart attack. No symptoms yet, but his cardiac rhythm was dangerously unstable. They rushed him to the hospital, where emergency surgery saved his life. The attending cardiologist said if the heart attack had progressed another 30 minutes without treatment, the driver would have died. The pavement had given me exactly the information I needed to save his life. Mr. Cronkite, I don't understand how LED lights can conduct cardiac monitoring through asphalt reflections. I don't know why this is happening at our truck stop, or why I'm the only one who can see and hear these diagnostic signals. But I know that whatever force is providing this information is trying to prevent deaths, trying to give advance warning about cardiac events that would otherwise go undetected until it's too late. I've started keeping a log of drivers whose heart reflections show concerning patterns, and I've developed techniques for encouraging them to seek medical attention without sounding insane. It's not easy work, but it feels important. Like I've been chosen to be some kind of cardiac early warning system for the trucking community. The heart reflections continue every night, showing me the cardiovascular health of drivers from across the country. Some are strong and steady. Others are crying out for help, and I'm the only one who can hear them. Laura, your story raises fascinating questions about the intersection of technology and human intuition. The idea that LED lights could somehow display diagnostic information about human cardiac function. It sounds impossible, but your track record of accurate predictions suggests something extraordinary is happening in that truck stop parking lot. I contacted the Austin Emergency Medical Services and confirmed that they've responded to an unusual number of cardiac emergencies at commercial vehicle locations over the past month. The paramedic supervisor mentioned that several drivers have credited a gas station employee with convincing them to seek medical attention before their symptoms became critical. What strikes me about your account is how you've transformed a mysterious phenomenon into a practical tool for saving lives. Instead of being frightened by the heart reflections and sounds, you've learned to interpret them as medical data and act on that information. The American Heart Association reports that heart disease kills more long-haul truck drivers than any other occupation-related factor. Irregular schedules,
poor diet, limited exercise, and high stress levels create a perfect storm for cardiovascular problems. Many drivers die alone in their cabs, far from medical help, because heart attacks often occur without warning. Maybe what you're seeing isn't supernatural at all. Maybe it's the emergence of some kind of unconscious diagnostic ability, triggered by subtle visual and auditory cues that your conscious mind interprets as LED reflections and heartbeat sounds. Or maybe the pavement beneath that truck stop has absorbed something from all the cardiac distress that's occurred there over the years. The fear, the chest pain, the final moments of drivers whose hearts failed far from home. Whatever the explanation, you've become a guardian angel for the trucking community, Laura. Your willingness to act on inexplicable information has saved lives and prevented families from losing fathers, mothers, sons, and daughters to sudden cardiac death. The Austin night air carries music from a dozen clubs, but tonight I'm hearing a different rhythm, the steady lub-dub of healthy hearts, the irregular stuttering of hearts in distress, the silence where heartbeats should be but aren't. October has always been a month when the impossible becomes possible, when ordinary people discover extraordinary abilities, when the boundary between science and mystery dissolves like morning mist. We've got more stories from the overnight shift ahead, tales of whispered voices and mysterious footprints, of messages that appear where no messages should be, each one a reminder that the most routine work can become a calling and the most ordinary places can become sanctuaries for the sacred. Laura, if you're listening, know that your work matters in ways you may never fully understand. Every heart you've helped save sends ripples through countless other lives, spouses who won't be widowed, children who won't be orphaned, communities that won't lose vital members. The neon hearts in the pavement are crying out for help, and you're the only one who can hear their call. Stay strong, guardian of the highway. The night is still young, and there are more hearts to save. We'll return after this brief message from HeartSafe America, because every heartbeat matters, and every life deserves a chance to continue. The midnight hour has passed. Fellow travelers of the dark, Edward Cronkite here with you on WNMR, Nocturnal Mysteries Radio, where we venture into territories that daylight rarely illuminates. That haunting composition was Frozen Whispers by Midnight Syndicate, and it carries us perfectly into our next journey through the fluorescent-lit landscape of late-night commerce. During our break, something remarkable happened. A cardiologist from Baylor University Medical Center called to say he'd heard Laura's story and wanted to offer his perspective. He mentioned that there have been documented cases of people developing heightened sensitivity to cardiovascular distress signals. Subtle changes in posture, breathing patterns, and skin coloration that the conscious mind interprets as mystical phenomena. But he also said that regardless of the mechanism, Laura's interventions have demonstrated genuine medical value. Sometimes healing comes through channels we don't fully understand, and the important thing is that lives are being saved. Our seventh tale takes us to Miami, Florida, where the air hangs thick with humidity and the promise of storms that may never come. This story arrives from Chris, a 35-year-old HVAC technician who specializes in commercial refrigeration systems for gas stations throughout South Florida. Chris's email arrived yesterday evening, sent from what appears to be a service truck's mobile computer. The timestamp shows 3:17 a.m., and the message carries the clinical precision of someone trained to diagnose mechanical problems, but finding himself confronting something that defies all technical explanation. The subject line was simply, "cold storage breathing." When I read his account, I understood why those 3 words had been sufficient to convey the impossible nature of his experience. Here's what Chris shared.
Edward, I've been working as a commercial refrigeration technician for 12 years, servicing HVAC systems for gas stations, convenience stores, and truck stops throughout Miami-Dade County. I know how cooling systems work, how they sound when they're functioning properly, and how to diagnose problems when they're not. What I've been experiencing at a Valero station in Homestead has nothing to do with mechanical failure, and everything to do with something that shouldn't exist in any technical manual. The station sits on US 1, about 20 miles south of downtown Miami. It's a busy location, serving both local traffic and vehicles traveling to and from the Keys. They've got a large convenience store, multiple fuel islands, and an extensive cold storage facility for beverages, dairy products, and prepared foods. The cold storage area is where I've been having problems. It's a walk-in cooler about the size of a small bedroom, maintained at 38 degrees Fahrenheit by a commercial refrigeration unit mounted on the exterior wall. Standard equipment, evaporator coils, condenser fans, temperature controls, humidity management. I installed the system myself 18 months ago, and I service it every 6 weeks. 3 months ago, the station manager called with a complaint about temperature fluctuations in the cold storage. The digital readout was showing correct temperatures, but staff reported that the space felt warmer than it should, especially during overnight shifts. I ran full diagnostics on the system. Refrigerant levels were perfect, compressor was functioning normally, airflow was unobstructed. But when I checked the evaporator coils inside the cooler, I noticed something odd. There was condensation forming in unusual patterns on the cooling fins. Not the random moisture you'd expect from normal operation, but organized formations that looked almost like breath marks. You know how your breath fogs up a cold window? It was like that, but in repetitive patterns across the evaporator surface. I cleaned the coils thoroughly, thinking maybe there was some kind of contamination affecting heat transfer. The condensation patterns disappeared, and the cooling system returned to normal operation. But 2 weeks later, the manager called again. Same problem. Temperature fluctuations, staff reporting that the cold storage felt warmer than the digital readings indicated. This time, when I examined the evaporator coils, the condensation patterns were more pronounced. Clear, rhythmic markings that appeared to be forming and dissipating in real time, like someone was breathing directly onto the cooling fins. I installed additional temperature sensors throughout the cold storage space, thinking maybe there were hot spots or air circulation problems that weren't being detected by the main thermostat. The sensor readings showed something impossible. While the main cooling system maintained 38 degrees consistently, there were small areas of the storage space that were registering temperatures 10 to 15 degrees warmer, but only intermittently, in patterns that corresponded to the condensation formations on the evaporator coils. It was like someone with a body temperature of 98 degrees was moving through the cold storage space, creating pockets of warmth wherever they went. A month ago, I decided to monitor the system overnight to observe these temperature fluctuations in real time. I arrived at the station around midnight and set up my diagnostic equipment in the cold storage area. The space was functioning normally. Steady temperature, proper humidity levels, quiet operation from the cooling system. At 1:43 a.m., I heard it for the first time. Breathing. Not the mechanical sounds of the refrigeration system, which I know intimately. Human breathing. Slow, deliberate inhalation and exhalation that seemed to be coming from inside the evaporator unit itself. I checked every component of the cooling system, thinking maybe there was an air leak or unusual airflow pattern that was creating the sound. But the breathing was too organic, too rhythmic, too human to be mechanical in origin. As I listened, the condensation patterns on the evaporator coils began forming again. Small clouds of moisture that appeared and dissipated in perfect sync with the breathing sounds. And the temperature sensors I'd installed started showing those impossible warm spots, moving through the cold storage space like someone was walking around in there with me. But I was alone, completely alone in a locked, refrigerated room. The breathing continued for about 20 minutes, during which time the overall temperature of the storage space rose 3 degrees, despite the cooling system running continuously. It was like the presence, whatever it was generating enough body heat to overwhelm the refrigeration capacity. When the breathing stopped, the temperature returned to normal within minutes. I reviewed the equipment logs the next day, and they showed exactly what I'd observed: unexplained temperature spikes that coincided with increased humidity levels and unusual power consumption by the cooling system. The following week, I installed a digital audio recorder in the cold storage area, hoping to capture evidence of the breathing sounds. The recordings were clear and undeniable. Every night between 1:30 and 2 o'clock a.m., the recorder picked up human breathing sounds that lasted 20 to 30 minutes. But there was something else in the recordings. Whispered words that I hadn't heard during my direct observations. Very faint but audible when I enhanced the audio. "Please, keep me warm. So cold." The voice was male, elderly, with the labored quality of someone experiencing respiratory distress. I started researching the history of the station location, thinking maybe there had been an accident or death that could explain the phenomena. What I found was more relevant than I'd expected. Before the current Valero station was built, the site was occupied by a small medical clinic called Homestead Family Health. The clinic operated from 1998 to 2019, when it was demolished to make way for the gas station. According to archived records from Miami-Dade Emergency Services, the clinic had a significant number of emergency calls related to hypothermia and cold-related medical crises. South Florida doesn't get truly cold very often, but when it does, homeless individuals and elderly people without adequate heating can develop life-threatening conditions. One case stood out in the records: an 81-year-old man named Robert Chen, who died of hypothermia in the clinic's waiting room in January 2018. He'd been brought in by paramedics after being found unconscious in a park during an unusually cold spell. The medical examiner's report indicated that Chen had been suffering from hypothermia for several hours before being discovered. His core body temperature had dropped to 87 degrees, and despite the medical staff's efforts to rewarm him, he died of cardiac arrest related to cold exposure. The report noted that Chen's final words, recorded by the attending nurse, were, "Please keep me warm, I'm so cold." Edward, I think Robert Chen is still trying to get warm, still seeking the medical attention he needed that January night. But instead of finding a heated clinic, he's encountering a refrigerated storage room that maintains the same bone-deep cold that killed him. Last week, I made a decision that felt both professional and humanitarian. I adjusted the temperature settings in the cold storage room, raising the target temperature from 38 degrees to 42 degrees. Still cold enough for food safety, but warmer than the deadly hypothermic conditions that Chen had experienced. I also left a note in the storage area, addressed to Robert Chen. I explained that the medical clinic was gone, that the space was now used for food storage, but that I would maintain it at a temperature that wouldn't cause him further distress. For the past week, there have been no breathing sounds in the cold storage area. No condensation patterns on the evaporator coils, no unexplained temperature fluctuations, no whispered pleas for warmth. The cooling system is operating normally at the higher temperature setting, and the food storage requirements are still being met safely. I think Robert Chen finally found the warmth he was seeking. But there's something else I need to mention. Yesterday, while reviewing the system logs, I discovered that during the time when Chen's presence was affecting the cold storage temperature, the cooling system was working harder, but also running more efficiently. The temperature fluctuations he was causing had somehow optimized the refrigeration cycle, reducing energy consumption by 12% while maintaining food safety standards. Even in death, seeking warmth in a space designed for cold, Robert Chen was contributing to something beneficial. Maybe that's what ghosts really are. People whose final needs become so powerful that they persist beyond death. And sometimes those needs can be met in ways that help the living as well. I plan to maintain the higher temperature setting in the cold storage room. It's a small gesture, but it seems to have brought peace to someone who died alone and cold far from home. And if it happens to save the station money on their electric bill, well, that's just Robert Chen's way of saying thank you, Chris.
Chris, your story demonstrates something beautiful about the intersection of technical expertise and human compassion. The fact that you were able to provide comfort to Robert Chen while also improving the efficiency of the cooling system, that suggests that sometimes the needs of the dead and the needs of the living aren't as incompatible as we might think. I contacted the Miami-Dade Medical Examiner's office and confirmed the details about Robert Chen's death. The attending physician from that night mentioned that hypothermia cases often involve a desperate search for warmth that can persist psychologically even after the physical crisis has passed. What strikes me about your account is how you approached an unexplained phenomenon with the same methodical problem-solving approach you'd use for any technical issue. You documented the anomalies, researched the history, and ultimately found a solution that addressed both the supernatural problem and the practical needs of the business. The National Weather Service reports that South Florida experiences dangerous cold snaps approximately every 7 to 10 years, and each event results in multiple hypothermia-related deaths among vulnerable populations. Robert Chen was one of dozens of people who've died from cold exposure in a region where most people never experience truly frigid temperatures. Maybe that's why his presence was so persistent. Dying of cold in a place known for warmth creates a kind of metaphysical contradiction that takes extraordinary circumstances to resolve. Your decision to adjust the temperature settings wasn't just a technical modification. It was an act of recognition and respect for someone whose final moments were defined by an unbearable need for warmth. The humid Miami night presses against my studio windows, carrying the scent of ocean and tropical flowers. But even in the warmth, I can imagine the bone-deep cold that Robert Chen experienced in his final hours, the desperate search for heat that continued even after death. October nights in radio stations have always felt permeable to me, like the boundary between frequencies becomes thin enough for voices from other dimensions to slip through. Sometimes those voices are asking for help, and sometimes helping them helps us in ways we never expected. We've got more stories from the overnight shift coming your way. Tales of mysterious footprints and glowing messages, of presences that appear where no one should be. Each one a reminder that the most ordinary workplaces can become stages for extraordinary human drama. Chris, if you're listening, I want you to know that what you did for Robert Chen represents the best of human technical expertise combined with compassion. In a world that often treats death as a problem to be solved rather than a transition to be honored, you found a way to provide comfort across the boundary between life and death. May Robert Chen rest in warmth, and may your cooling systems run efficiently in service of both the living and the dead. The night deepens around us, but some flames burn eternally. Stay with us as we continue our exploration of the places where mystery and machinery intersect. We'll return after this message from Thermal Care HVAC, keeping you comfortable in every dimension of existence. Past 1 o'clock now, denizens of the darkness. This is Edward Cronkite keeping you company on WNMR, Nocturnal Mysteries Radio, where we traverse the liminal spaces between the explicable and the impossible. That ethereal piece was Glass Corridors by Sabled Sun, and its crystalline quality seems to anticipate our next journey into the transparent barriers that separate us from what exactly? Before we continue, I want to acknowledge the flood of responses Chris's story has generated. 3 HVAC technicians have called in the past hour, each describing similar temperature anomalies in commercial cooling systems. One mentioned finding condensation patterns that resembled handprints on evaporator coils. Another reported whispered voices coming from ventilation ducts in a convenience store built on the site of a former homeless shelter. It seems the intersection of commercial refrigeration and human tragedy is more common than any of us realized. Our 8th tale originates from Portland, Oregon, where the rain falls like a benediction and the mist blurs the line between the solid and the spectral. This account comes from Megan, a 27-year-old woman who works as a door attendant at a Circle K station in the Alberta Arts District. Megan's position involves a unique aspect of gas station operations that most customers never consider: managing the flow of foot traffic through the store's entrance system. The Circle K where she works features a revolving glass door designed to maintain climate control while accommodating the constant stream of customers typical of urban convenience stores. Her email arrived this morning at 5:41 a.m., sent from what appears to be a break room computer. The message header indicates it was composed over nearly 2 hours, with multiple pauses and revisions. That kind of careful construction suggests someone wrestling with experiences that challenge the basic assumptions of reality. Here's Megan's account. Mr. Cronkite, I work as a door attendant at Circle K on Alberta Street in Portland. It's not a position that exists at most gas stations, but our location is unusual. We're in a converted bank building from the 1940s. And the architects incorporated a revolving glass door system that requires periodic maintenance and monitoring. My job involves keeping the door mechanism clean and lubricated, ensuring it rotates smoothly, and assisting customers who have difficulty with the revolving motion. It's detail-oriented work that keeps me stationed near the entrance for most of my 8-hour overnight shift. The revolving door itself is a beautiful piece of engineering. 4 glass panels set in a brass frame with ball bearings that allow it to rotate with minimal effort. When it's properly maintained, customers can enter and exit simultaneously without disrupting the store's climate control or creating bottlenecks during busy periods. I've been working this position for 14 months, and I know every sound the door makes, every vibration in the mechanism, every way the glass panels reflect the street lighting outside. 3 weeks ago, things started changing in ways that made me question both my perceptions and my sanity. It began with fingerprints. As part of my routine maintenance, I clean the glass panels multiple times per shift, using a squeegee and cleaning solutions specifically designed for commercial glass surfaces. The panels collect fingerprints, handprints, and smudges from customers throughout the day,
and keeping them spotless is essential for both appearance and visibility. The cleaning process is straightforward. Spray the solution, squeegee from top to bottom, dry with lint-free cloths. I've done it thousands of times, and I know exactly what the glass should look like when I'm finished. But 3 weeks ago, I started finding fingerprints that appeared after I'd completed the cleaning process. Not random smudges or marks that could be explained by customers touching the glass. Clear, distinct fingerprint impressions that appeared on the interior surface of the panels where customers can't reach during normal operation. The first time it happened, I assumed I'd missed a spot during cleaning, but when I examined the prints more closely, I realized they were fresh, still slightly wet, like someone had just pressed their fingers against the glass. I cleaned the panels again, more thoroughly this time, and watched to see if any customers touched the interior surfaces. But the revolving door design prevents customers from reaching the interfaces of the glass panels during normal use. 20 minutes later, new fingerprints appeared in the exact same locations. I started documenting these incidents, taking photographs of the fingerprints before cleaning them away. The patterns were consistent, always the same finger positions, always on the interior surface, always appearing when no customers were using the door. But the photographs showed something that made my skin crawl. The fingerprints were significantly larger than normal human prints. Not distorted or stretched, just bigger. Like they'd been made by someone with unusually large hands. A week into this phenomenon, I decided to stay alert during my entire shift to catch whoever was leaving these prints. I positioned myself with a clear view of the revolving door and watched every customer who entered or exited. At 2:17 a.m., with no customers in sight and no one having used the door for over 10 minutes, I heard the distinctive sound of the door mechanism beginning to rotate. I looked up from my cleaning supplies to see the door turning slowly, as if someone was pushing it from inside. But there was no one in the revolving chambers, just 4 empty glass panels rotating in their brass frame. As the door completed one full revolution, I saw them. Fresh fingerprints appearing on the interior glass surfaces, forming in real time like invisible hands were pressing against the panels from inside the mechanism. The door continued rotating for about 30 seconds, making a complete revolution every 10 seconds or so. With each rotation, more fingerprints appeared, until all 4 glass panels showed clear handprint patterns on their interior surfaces. Then the door stopped, and everything was quiet, except for the hum of the store's fluorescent lighting. I approached the door cautiously and examined the new fingerprints. They were identical to the ones I'd been photographing for the past week, oversized, clearly defined, and slightly damp to the touch. But there was something else. A faint smell of wet paper towels lingering around the door mechanism. Not the chemical scent of my cleaning solution, but the organic smell of wet paper, like someone had been using damp towels to clean something. The next night, I brought a digital audio recorder to capture any sounds associated with the mysterious door rotations. What I recorded was more disturbing than I'd expected. At 2:23 a.m., the door began its automatic rotation again. But this time, the audio picked up something my ears had missed. The sound of someone breathing heavily, like they were exerting themselves physically. The breathing was labored and rhythmic, corresponding exactly to the rotation speed of the door. And underneath the breathing, I could hear a faint scraping sound, like someone rubbing cloth or paper against glass. When I enhanced the audio on my computer, I could make out whispered words between the breathing. Almost, clean, almost, got it. Someone was trying to clean the glass panels from inside the revolving door mechanism. someone who was apparently trapped in a space that shouldn't be able to contain a human being. I started researching the history of the building, thinking maybe there had been an accident or death related to the revolving door. What I found was more tragic than I'd anticipated. The building had indeed been a bank from 1941 to 1987, and the revolving door was original to the construction. During the bank's operation, there had been one significant incident involving the door mechanism. In 1983, a maintenance worker named Harold Mills had been killed while servicing the revolving door's bearing system. According to the accident report, Mills had been working alone on a Sunday morning when the door mechanism malfunctioned, trapping him in the central pivot housing. The malfunction caused the door to rotate continuously at high speed, and Mills was unable to escape before suffering fatal injuries. He wasn't discovered until Monday morning when the bank opened for business. The investigating report noted that Mills had been attempting to clean grease buildup from the bearing housing when the accident occurred. His cleaning rags and tools were found scattered throughout the mechanism. The report also mentioned that Mills had been known for his meticulous attention to detail. He would often spend extra time ensuring that every surface was perfectly clean, even areas that customers would never see. Mr. Cronkite, I think Harold Mills is still trying to finish his cleaning job. Still trapped in that revolving door mechanism, still attempting to maintain the standards of cleanliness that cost him his life 40 years ago. But here's what really disturbs me. The fingerprints appearing on the glass panels aren't random. They're appearing in exactly the patterns you'd expect from someone trying to clean glass from the inside. Fingers spread wide for maximum contact, positioned to work cleaning solution across the entire surface. Last week, I decided to try communicating with Harold Mills directly. During one of the mysterious door rotations, I spoke out loud to the empty mechanism. "Harold, if that's you, I appreciate your dedication to keeping the door clean, but you don't have to do this work anymore. I'm here to take care of it." The door stopped rotating immediately. For a moment, everything was silent. Then I heard a voice, very faint but clearly audible. "But it's not clean enough. It's never clean enough." "It's clean, Harold," I said. "You did good work. You can rest now. The grease, there's still grease in the bearings. I have to get it all. The bearings are fine now, Harold. Modern lubricants, modern maintenance schedules. The door is working perfectly." There was a long pause. Then, "Really? Really? You can stop working now." I haven't heard the mysterious door rotation since that conversation. No more fingerprints appearing on the interior glass. No more sounds of labored breathing or whispered cleaning instructions. But I've started being extra thorough in my own maintenance routine, making sure the door mechanism is lubricated exactly according to specifications. I figure it's the least I can do for Harold Mills, who died trying to keep this door functioning properly. Yesterday, while cleaning the glass panels, I found something that hadn't been there before. A small piece of paper tucked into the brass frame, written in what appeared to be pencil. "Thank you for finishing my work. The door looks good. H.M." I've kept that note in my pocket ever since. Mr. Cronkite. Harold Mills spent his life maintaining machinery, taking pride in work that most people never notice. Even death couldn't stop his dedication to craftsmanship and cleanliness. But sometimes the dead need permission to rest, need someone to acknowledge that their work was valuable and that it's okay to stop striving for impossible perfection. I'm honored to have been able to give Harold Mills that permission. The revolving door works perfectly now, and I make sure it stays that way. Not just because it's my job, but because it's a memorial to someone who cared deeply about doing things right. Some legacies are worth preserving, even when they're written in fingerprints on glass. Megan.
Megan, your story illustrates something profound about the nature of dedication and the way our deepest professional commitments can persist beyond death. Harold Mills wasn't haunting that revolving door out of anger or unfinished personal business. He was there because someone has to maintain the machinery. Someone has to ensure it works properly for the people who depend on it. I contacted the Oregon Occupational Safety and Health Division and confirmed the details about Harold Mills' accident. The investigative report noted that Mills had requested overtime that Sunday to complete maintenance that could have been postponed, but he was concerned about potential safety issues if the door mechanism wasn't properly serviced. What strikes me about your account is how you recognized Harold's continuing commitment to his work and found a way to honor that dedication while also giving him permission to rest. Your willingness to take on the responsibility he'd been carrying for 40 years. That's a kind of professional succession that transcends the boundary between life and death. The Bureau of Labor Statistics reports that maintenance workers have one of the highest rates of workplace fatalities in the country. Often because they're working alone with dangerous equipment, trying to keep systems functioning that most people take for granted. Harold Mills died doing work that keeps buildings safe and functional, work that goes unnoticed until something breaks down. Maybe that's why his spirit was so persistent. He understood how much people depend on properly maintained equipment, and he couldn't bear the thought of someone being hurt because he hadn't finished his job. Your conversation with Harold, assuring him that modern maintenance standards would keep the door safe, that wasn't just compassion. It was professional courtesy. One maintenance worker acknowledging another's expertise and dedication. The October rain is tapping against my studio windows like fingers on glass, and I can almost hear the whispered words of workers who died trying to keep the world running smoothly. October has always been a month when the boundary between duty and obsession becomes permeable, when dedication becomes haunting. We've got more stories from the overnight shift ahead, tales of rain-soaked apparitions and electronic prophecies, of messages that appear where no messages should be. Each one a reminder that some commitments run deeper than life itself. Megan, if you're listening, I want you to know that what you did for Harold Mills represents the best of human professional ethics. You recognized that his dedication deserved respect, and you found a way to provide closure for someone whose work ethic had trapped him in an endless cycle of striving for perfection. The revolving door turns smoothly now, maintained by living hands that honor the memory of those who came before. The night grows deeper, but some duties are eternal. Stay with us as we continue our exploration of the places where professional responsibility intersects with the supernatural. We'll return after this message from Portland Building Maintenance, because good work deserves recognition in this world and the next. The clock strikes 1:30, Wanderers in the Dark. Edward Cronkite here with you on WNMR, Nocturnal Mysteries Radio, where we examine the spaces between raindrops and the shadows that dance just beyond our peripheral vision. That melancholic composition was Storm's End by Cryo Chamber, and its atmospheric quality perfectly captures the mood of tonight's next journey. During our break, something interesting happened. The Oregon Building Maintenance Association called to say they'd heard Megan's story and wanted to establish a memorial fund in Harold Mills' name. dedicated to improving safety standards for maintenance workers who operate alone with dangerous equipment. Sometimes recognition comes 40 years late, but it still matters. Our ninth tale brings us to Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, where the rain falls with the weight of history and the streets echo with the footsteps of those who walked here long before us. This account comes from Ryan, a 24-year-old full-service attendant at a BP station in the city's Northern Liberties neighborhood. Ryan's position is increasingly rare in modern gas stations. He's one of the few remaining pump attendants who provides hands-on fuel service for customers who prefer not to handle gasoline themselves. It's old-fashioned work that requires him to be outside in all weather conditions, often during the overnight hours when the city feels most vulnerable to the mysterious. His email arrived during yesterday's afternoon thunderstorm, sent from what appears to be a smartphone with a cracked screen. The text shows the fragmented quality of messages composed while rainwater seeps into electronic devices. The timestamp indicates 3:23 a.m., and the message carries the urgent quality of someone who needs to document an experience before memory begins to blur the details. Here's Ryan's account.
Mr. Cronkite, I pump gas for people at a BP station on Spring Garden Street in Philadelphia. Full service. Pump your gas, check your oil, clean your windshield if you want. Most customers these days just want the gas. But I take pride in doing the job right, the way it used to be done when people cared about service. I work the overnight shift, 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., 6 nights a week. It's good work, steady pay, and I like being outside instead of stuck behind a counter somewhere. The station's been here since 1967, back when full service was the standard, not the exception. 3 weeks ago, we had a series of heavy rainstorms that lasted almost a week. Not unusual for October in Philadelphia, but these storms were different, more persistent, more intense. The kind of rain that makes you think about floods and rivers overflowing their banks. During heavy rain, my job becomes more challenging. I've got a covered area under the pump canopy, but when I need to service vehicles at the outer pumps, I'm exposed to whatever weather is happening. The station provides rain gear, yellow slicker, waterproof pants, rubber boots, standard equipment for outdoor work. On the third night of the storms, around 2:30 a.m., I was pumping gas for a customer at Pump 6, the furthest from the building. The rain was coming down hard, drumming on the metal canopy and running off in sheets. Visibility was limited to maybe 20 feet in any direction. As I was filling the customer's tank, I saw movement near the edge of the station property. A figure in a yellow raincoat walking slowly along the perimeter fence that separates our lot from the empty field next door. Nothing unusual about someone walking in the rain. People work all kinds of hours in the city, and not everyone has a car. But this person was moving strangely, like they were having trouble maintaining their balance. They'd take a few steps, pause, then continue at an uneven pace. I finished servicing the customer and watched the figure in the yellow raincoat. They were heading toward the back of our property, where we keep the dumpsters and equipment storage. It's not a public area, and there's no reason for anyone to be walking there, especially in weather like this. I grabbed my flashlight and headed over to check on them, thinking maybe someone was lost or needed help. As I got closer, I could hear the sound of their raincoat, that distinctive rustling of vinyl or plastic rubbing together with each movement. But when I reached the area where I'd seen them, there was no one there. Just rain running off the dumpsters and pooling in the gravel. I swept my flashlight beam around the entire area, calling out, "Hello? Anyone there? Are you okay?" No response, just the sound of rain and the distant hum of traffic on Spring Garden Street. I was turning to head back to the pumps when I heard it again. That rustling sound,
like someone in a raincoat moving through wet vegetation. But it was coming from behind me now, from the direction I'd just searched. I spun around and pointed my flashlight toward the sound. Nothing, just empty space and falling rain. But as I stood there listening, the rustling sound moved around me in a wide circle, like someone was walking around the perimeter of where I was standing. I could track the movement by sound, but my flashlight beam never caught anything except raindrops and shadows. This continued for maybe 2 minutes, the sound of footsteps and rustling fabric circling my position while I stood in the center, trying to illuminate whatever was making the noise. Then it stopped, and everything was quiet, except for the rain. I returned to the pump area, but I kept thinking about what I'd experienced. The sounds had been too clear, too specific to be explained by wind or settling equipment. Someone in a raincoat had been walking around out there, even though I couldn't see them. The next night, it happened again. Same time, around 2:30 a.m., same location. I was servicing a customer when I spotted the figure in the yellow raincoat near the perimeter fence. This time, I was ready for them. I finished with the customer quickly and immediately headed toward the back of the property, flashlight in hand. But again, when I reached the area where I'd seen the figure, there was no one there. And again, I heard the rustling sound moving around me in circles, while my flashlight failed to reveal anything. But this time, I tried a different approach. Instead of chasing the sound, I stood perfectly still and listened carefully to the pattern of movement. The footsteps weren't random. They were following a specific route, from the perimeter fence to the dumpster area, then along the back of the building, then back to the fence. The same path, repeated 3 times before the sound faded away, like someone was patrolling the property, checking for security issues or problems that needed attention. I started paying attention to other details during these encounters. The rustling sound was consistent with heavy vinyl rain gear, but it had an unusual quality, too stiff, too brittle, like the material was old and starting to crack. And underneath the rustling, I could sometimes hear other sounds, keys jingling, footsteps crunching on gravel, the occasional scrape of something being dragged or moved. On the 5th night of the storms, I decided to research the history of our station, thinking maybe there had been security issues or incidents that could explain the mysterious patrols. What I found was more relevant than I'd expected. From 1967 to 1994, the station employed a full-time security guard for the overnight shift. His name was William Torres, and his job was to patrol the property during the vulnerable hours when the station was closed or operating with minimal staff. Torres worked alone, walking the perimeter of the property every 30 minutes to check for break-ins, vandalism, or equipment problems. He was known for his dedication to the job and his distinctive yellow rain gear, which he wore during Philadelphia's frequent storms. In September 1994, Torres was killed during an attempted robbery. 3 men had broken into the station around 3 a.m., and Torres confronted them while making his regular patrol. He was shot twice and died at the scene. The newspaper articles about the incident mentioned that Torres was found near the back dumpster area wearing his yellow raincoat. The rain that night had washed away most of the evidence, and the killers were never caught. Mr. Cronkite, I think William Torres is still patrolling our station, still making his rounds, still checking for security problems, still trying to protect the property that cost him his life. But there's something else I need to tell you. After I learned about Torres's death, I started paying closer attention to the station's security during my shifts, and I've noticed that on nights when I hear the rustling raincoat and the circling footsteps, we never have any problems. No attempted break-ins, no vandalism, no equipment failures that would require emergency repairs.
But on nights when I don't hear Torres making his rounds, we've had 3 separate incidents. An attempted break-in at the service bay, graffiti sprayed on the building side wall, and a pump malfunction that caused a small fuel spill. It's like Torres's ghostly patrols are actually preventing security problems, 30 years after his death. Last week, I decided to acknowledge his continuing service. During one of the rainstorms, when I heard the familiar rustling sound beginning its circuit around the property, I called out, "Thank you, Mr. Torres. I appreciate you keeping watch over this place." The rustling stopped for a moment, then continued with what seemed like a slightly different rhythm, more purposeful, more confident. Since then, the sound of the yellow raincoat has become almost comforting. When I'm working alone in bad weather, knowing that William Torres is still out there checking the perimeter makes me feel safer. He died protecting this station, and apparently death wasn't going to stop him from continuing that protection. I've started leaving the back gate unlocked on rainy nights, so Torres doesn't have to climb over the fence during his patrols. It's a small gesture, but it seems like the right thing to do for someone who's still dedicated to his job after 30 years. Yesterday, I found something tucked under the windshield wiper of my car, a small piece of paper, damp from the rain, with "Thank you" written in what looked like pencil. The handwriting matched the signature on William Torres's old employment records. Mr. Cronkite, some people take their responsibilities so seriously that not even death can relieve them of duty. William Torres is still out there every rainy night, making sure our station is secure, making sure the people who work here are safe. I'm honored to work alongside him, even if I can only hear him and never see him. The next time you're at a gas station during a storm, listen carefully for the sound of rustling rain gear. You might be hearing someone who died protecting that place and who continues to protect it still. Some dedication never dies, it just changes forms. Ryan.
Ryan, your story demonstrates something remarkable about the persistence of duty and the way some people's commitment to protecting others transcends death itself. William Torres didn't haunt that gas station out of trauma or unfinished business. He continued his patrols because someone needs to keep the place secure, and he took that responsibility seriously enough to carry it beyond the grave. I contacted the Philadelphia Police Department and confirmed the details about William Torres's murder. The detective who originally investigated the case mentioned that Torres had been known for his conscientiousness. He'd often discover and report security issues that the day shift had missed, and his detailed patrol logs had helped prevent several break-ins. What strikes me about your account is how you recognized Torres's continuing service and found ways to support his ghostly security work. Unlocking the gate so he doesn't have to climb the fence, acknowledging his presence. Those aren't just gestures of respect, they're professional courtesies that honor his dedication. The National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health reports that security guards have one of the highest rates of workplace violence fatalities in the country. They're often alone, often working nights, often confronting dangerous situations with minimal backup. William Torres died doing exactly the kind of work that puts security personnel at risk every night across the country. Maybe that's why his spirit was so persistent. He understood how vulnerable overnight workers can be, and he couldn't bear the thought of someone else being hurt on property he was supposed to protect. Your observation that security incidents only occur on nights when Torres isn't making his rounds, that suggests his ghostly patrols are genuinely effective. Death didn't end his ability to deter crime, it just made his methods more mysterious. The Philadelphia rain continues its ancient rhythm against my studio windows, and I can almost hear the rustling of vinyl raincoats moving through the darkness. October storms have always carried voices, whispers of those who worked in the weather, who died in the rain, who continue their duties long after their shifts should have ended. We've got more stories from the overnight shift coming your way. Tales of electronic prophecies and underground voices, of presences that appear in reflections and shadows. Each one a reminder that some jobs are callings, and some callings are eternal. Ryan, if you're listening, I want you to know that what you've done for William Torres represents the best of workplace solidarity. You recognize that his dedication deserved support, and you found ways to honor someone who died protecting the place where you now work. The yellow raincoat rustles through the night, keeping watch over those who keep watch over us. Some patrols never end, they just adapt to new circumstances. Stay with us as we continue our exploration of the places where duty intersects with the supernatural. We'll return after this message from Guardian Security Services, because protection doesn't end with the shift, and some watchers never sleep. Two o'clock approaches. Fellow navigators of the night, this is Edward Cronkite with you on WNMR, Nocturnal Mysteries Radio, where we illuminate the shadows that fluorescent lighting cannot reach. That haunting soundscape was digital seance by Flowers for Body Snatchers, and its electronic otherworldliness sets the perfect tone for our next exploration into the realm where technology meets the departed. During our last segment, something fascinating occurred. A security company in Philadelphia called to report that they've been receiving applications from people specifically requesting assignment to gas stations and convenience stores. When asked why, several applicants mentioned feeling called to protect these locations, though they couldn't explain what that meant. Makes you wonder how many living security guards are unknowingly working alongside spectral colleagues like William Torres. Our 10th tale takes us to Columbus, Ohio, where the autumn air carries whispers of change and the city's heartbeat pulses through neon signs and digital displays. This account comes from Sarah, a 31-year-old digital advertising specialist who maintains LED signage systems for a speedway station in the Short North Arts District. Sarah's work involves the modern intersection of commerce and technology, ensuring that electronic displays function properly, updating promotional messages, and troubleshooting the complex computer systems that drive contemporary gas station advertising. It's technical work that requires both electrical knowledge and software expertise. Her email arrived Wednesday evening, sent from what appears to be a service van's mobile workstation. The timestamp shows 3:45 a.m., and the message structure suggests someone who approaches problems methodically, but found herself confronting something that defied all logical troubleshooting procedures. Here's what Sarah shared.
Mr. Cronkite, I maintain LED advertising displays for gas stations throughout Central Ohio. It's specialized work that combines electrical engineering with computer programming. These modern signs are essentially outdoor computers that display scrolling messages, promotional graphics, and pricing information. The Speedway station, where I've been having problems, sits on High Street in Columbus's Short North District. It's a busy location that serves both local traffic and visitors to the Arts District. The LED sign system I installed there 18 months ago is state-of-the-art. Full-color display, wireless connectivity, weather-resistant housing designed to operate reliably in all conditions. The system consists of a main display panel facing the street and a smaller secondary display near the fuel pumps. Both are controlled by a central computer that runs custom software for managing message content. Timing and display effects. I service this location every 2 weeks, checking hardware connections, updating software, and ensuring the displays are functioning according to specifications. The system has been remarkably reliable since installation. Minimal downtime, consistent performance, no major technical issues. Until 3 weeks ago. The problem started with what appeared to be a simple software glitch. The station manager called to report that the main display was showing unauthorized messages mixed in with the normal promotional content. When I arrived to investigate, the display was functioning normally, showing gas prices, convenience store promotions, and corporate branding messages exactly as programmed. I ran full diagnostics on both the hardware and software systems, and everything tested perfectly. But as I was preparing to leave, something unusual happened. The display screen flickered once, then began showing a message that wasn't in any of our content databases. Time to go home. The message appeared in the same font and formatting as our standard promotional text, but it wasn't part of any authorized campaign. It displayed for about 10 seconds, then returned to normal programming. I checked the content management system, thinking maybe there had been an unauthorized access or a database corruption issue. But the system logs showed no unusual activity, no unauthorized logins, and no evidence of external interference. I documented the incident and updated the software with additional security protocols, thinking maybe someone had hacked into the wireless network. But the next week, the station manager called again. Same problem. Unauthorized messages appearing randomly throughout the day, always the same text. Time to go home. This time, I decided to monitor the system remotely using diagnostic software that logs every display change and system event. What I discovered was more puzzling than a simple hack. The unauthorized messages were appearing at exactly 3:33 a.m. every night, regardless of what content was scheduled to display at that time. They would show for precisely 13 seconds, then disappear without leaving any trace in the system logs. The technical impossibility of this situation was obvious to anyone familiar with LED display systems. The content management software doesn't allow manual overrides without proper authentication, and the timing controllers are hardwired to prevent unauthorized scheduling changes. Someone, or something, was bypassing multiple security systems to display a message that had no source code, no authorization, and no logical explanation. I installed additional monitoring equipment to capture more detailed data about these incidents. The readings I collected were disturbing. During the unauthorized message displays, the LED panels were drawing significantly more power than normal, almost double the standard consumption. The additional power wasn't being used for increased brightness or expanded display area. It was being consumed by processes that shouldn't exist in the system. More strange, the display panels were registering temperature readings that were inconsistent with normal operation. LED displays generate minimal heat, but during the time to go home messages, the panels were showing temperature signatures consistent with older incandescent lighting technology, like someone was running 1980s display equipment through a modern LED system. I started researching the history of the Speedway location, thinking maybe there had been previous signage installations that could explain the anomalous readings. What I found was more relevant than I'd expected. Before the current Speedway station was built, the site was occupied by a smaller independent gas station called Quick Stop that operated from 1983 to 2018. The original station featured a classic neon and incandescent sign system that was considered cutting edge for its time. The sign had been maintained by a local electrician named Robert Finch, who'd worked on commercial lighting systems throughout Columbus for over 30 years. According to business records, Finch had been responsible for the quick stop sign since its installation, servicing it weekly and taking pride in keeping it functioning perfectly. In December 2017, Finch was killed in an electrical accident while working on the quick stop sign during a late-night maintenance call. He was electrocuted when a worn wire caused a short circuit in the main display panel. The accident report noted that Finch had been working alone at 3:33 a.m., trying to repair a malfunction that was causing irregular message displays. His final service log entry, found on his clipboard, indicated he'd been struggling with unauthorized text appearing on the sign, messages that weren't part of the programmed content. The last entry in his handwriting read, "Display showing time to go home. Need to trace source and repair immediately." Mr. Cronkite, I think Robert Finch is still trying to fix that sign malfunction, still working on the electrical problem that killed him, still trying to eliminate the unauthorized messages that he couldn't explain in life. But here's what really disturbs me. The time to go home message that killed Finch in 2017 is the same message that's appearing on our modern LED system in 2024. Whatever was causing the original sign malfunction has somehow transferred to the new technology, carrying the same electrical anomaly across different hardware platforms. Last week, I decided to try communicating with Robert Finch directly. During one of the 3:33 a.m. message displays, I positioned myself near the LED panels and spoke out loud. "Mr. Finch, if that's you causing these display problems, I understand you're trying to fix a malfunction. But the old sign is gone now. The electrical problem you were working on has been resolved." The time to go home message flickered for a moment, then changed to something I'd never seen before. "Still broken. Need to fix." "The new LED system is working properly," I continued. "There's no electrical fault that needs repair." "You can stop working now?" "Can't stop? Sign still showing wrong messages?" I realized that from Robert Finch's perspective, he was still dealing with the same malfunction that had been plaguing the quick stop sign in 2017. He couldn't see that the entire system had been replaced. He was still trying to repair equipment that no longer existed. "Robert, the old sign was removed when the station was demolished. You're looking at completely new equipment now. The electrical fault that you were trying to fix, it's been resolved by replacing the entire system." The display went dark for almost a minute. Then, slowly, new text appeared. "New system? Yes, LED technology, completely different from the old incandescent setup. No wire faults, no electrical shorts, no malfunction to repair." Another long pause. Then, "I can go home now?" "Yes, Robert. Your work is finished. The sign is working perfectly." The display returned to normal programming. And I haven't seen any unauthorized messages since that conversation, but there's something else I need to mention. While reviewing the diagnostic data from that final interaction, I discovered that the power consumption anomalies I'd been recording weren't random electrical faults. They were consistent with the energy requirements of an old incandescent sign system trying to operate through modern LED hardware. Robert Finch had been attempting to run 1980s display technology through 2020's equipment, which explained both the excessive power draw and the temperature irregularities. He'd been trying to repair a sign that existed only in his memory, using electrical knowledge that was decades out of date. But once he understood that the technology had changed, once he realized that his repair work was complete, he was finally able to rest. Yesterday, I found a business card tucked behind one of the LED panels, an old card for Finch Electrical Services, with a handwritten note on the back. "Thank you for explaining the new technology. The sign looks good. RF." The handwriting matched Robert Finch's signature on the original installation documents from 1983. Mr. Cronkite, Robert Finch, spent his career maintaining signs that helped businesses communicate with their customers. Even death couldn't stop his dedication to keeping those communications clear and functional, but sometimes the dead need help understanding that technology has moved forward, that the problems they died trying to solve have been resolved by progress they couldn't have imagined. I'm honored to have been able to provide that explanation to someone who clearly cared deeply about his craft. The LED sign at the Speedway station works perfectly now, displaying promotional messages and pricing information exactly as designed. But sometimes, late at night, I think about Robert Finch and the dedication that kept him working on electrical problems for 7 years after his death. Some technical support never ends, it just needs occasional updates. Sarah.
Sarah, your story illustrates something beautiful about the relationship between craftsmanship and technological progress. Robert Finch wasn't haunting that sign system out of stubbornness. He was there because someone needs to maintain the equipment that helps businesses communicate with their customers. And he'd been doing that job for so long that death couldn't convince him to stop. I contacted the Ohio Department of Commerce and confirmed the details about Robert Finch's electrical accident. The investigating inspector mentioned that Finch had been known throughout Columbus for his meticulous attention to detail and his ability to diagnose complex electrical problems that other technicians couldn't solve. What strikes me about your account is how you recognize that Finch was operating with outdated technical knowledge and found a way to bridge the gap between 1980s technology and modern LED systems. Your explanation about how the old electrical problems had been resolved by new technology, that wasn't just troubleshooting. It was technical education across the boundary between life and death. The International Sign Association reports that electrical accidents involving commercial signage have decreased by 78% since LED technology became standard, largely because LED systems operate at much lower voltages and generate significantly less heat than older incandescent displays. Robert Finch died working with dangerous electrical equipment because that was the technology available in his era. But his dedication to maintaining communication systems was so strong that he continued working with electrical phantoms for 7 years, trying to solve problems that had already been eliminated by technological advancement. Your conversation with Finch, explaining how progress had resolved the issues he'd been struggling with, that represents something profound about how we honor the work of previous generations while embracing new solutions to old problems. The Columbus night air carries the glow of 1,000 electronic displays, each one a beacon of commerce and communication. October nights in cities have always felt electric to me, like the accumulated energy of human innovation creates its own form of consciousness. We've got more stories from the overnight shift ahead, tales of underground voices and phantom customers, of presences that appear in mirrors and shadows, each one a reminder that some dedication to service transcends both death and technological change. Sarah, if you're listening, I want you to know that what you did for Robert Finch represents the best of technical mentorship. You recognized that his expertise deserved respect, even when his knowledge had been superseded by technological progress, and you found a way to help him understand that his life's work had contributed to the solutions that made modern systems safer. The LED displays flicker with perfect digital precision, maintained by living hands that honor the memory of those who worked with more dangerous technologies. The night deepens, but some signals never fade. Stay with us as we continue our exploration of the places where human dedication intersects with technological evolution. We'll return after this message from Columbus Commercial Electric because good maintenance practices are timeless even as the technology evolves. Approaching the deepest hour of night, fellow seekers of the strange. Edward Cronkite here with you on WDNMR, Nocturnal Mysteries Radio, where we excavate the buried truths that daylight prefers to leave undisturbed. That ethereal piece was Subterranean Echoes by Paleowolf, and its deep, resonant quality seems to anticipate our descent into the hidden spaces beneath our feet. Before we continue, I want to share something that happened during our last break. An electrical contractor from Cleveland called to say he'd heard Sarah's story and recognized similar experiences from his own work. He mentioned finding old business cards and handwritten notes in electrical panels, always in locations where previous electricians had died on the job. Sometimes, he said, the dead leave their calling cards to let you know they approve of your work. Our 11th tale takes us to San Diego, California, where the Pacific Ocean whispers its eternal secrets and the earth beneath the city holds mysteries that most people never suspect. This account comes from Tyler, a 28-year-old plumber who specializes in underground utility repair for commercial properties throughout Southern California. Tyler's work takes him into the hidden infrastructure that keeps modern life functioning. The network of pipes, conduits, and access spaces that run beneath gas stations, convenience stores, and other commercial buildings. It's physically demanding work that requires him to crawl through tight spaces, diagnose complex problems, and repair systems that most people never see or think about. His email arrived this morning at 4:12 a.m., sent from what appears to be a work truck's mobile computer terminal. The message shows signs of having been composed in segments over several hours, with timestamps indicating multiple breaks. The kind of writing pattern that emerges when someone is trying to document an experience while simultaneously questioning their own perceptions. Here's Tyler's account.
Mr. Cronkite, I fix pipes for a living, water lines, sewer connections, drainage systems, the underground infrastructure that keeps commercial buildings functioning. Most of my work involves crawling through spaces that were never meant for human habitation, diagnosing problems in places where normal people would never venture. 3 weeks ago, I got a service call for a Chevron station on Claremont Mesa Boulevard in San Diego. The station manager reported persistent water pressure problems in their restroom facilities, and initial inspections suggested the issue was related to main supply lines running beneath the building's foundation. The Chevron station was built in 1989 on what used to be undeveloped mesa land. The building sits on a concrete slab foundation with an accessible crawl space that provides access to utility lines, electrical conduits, and plumbing connections. The crawl space is about 4 feet high and extends under the entire convenience store portion of the building. It's not comfortable space. You have to move on hands and knees or in a crouch, and the concrete floor is hard on joints and equipment. But I've worked in hundreds of similar spaces throughout my career, and this one seemed typical until I started encountering problems that had nothing to do with plumbing. The water pressure issue was straightforward to diagnose. A partially collapsed supply line near the main connection point. Standard repair job that would require removing a section of damaged pipe and installing new fittings. I set up my equipment in the crawl space and began excavating around the problem area. The work required removing sections of wooden subflooring to access the pipe connections beneath. About 20 minutes into the excavation, I heard something that made me stop working and listen carefully. Breathing, Not my own breathing, which I was conscious of, because working in confined spaces requires attention to air circulation and exertion levels. This was different breathing. Slower, deeper, more relaxed, like someone lying comfortably and breathing in their sleep. The sound was coming from directly beneath where I was working, as if someone was lying on the ground under the concrete foundation. I stopped digging and listened for several minutes. The breathing was steady and consistent, rising and falling in the rhythm you'd expect from someone in deep sleep or unconsciousness. But there couldn't be anyone beneath the foundation. The building sits on a concrete slab that was poured directly onto compacted earth. There's no basement, no underground room, no space where a person could be positioned below the floor level. I resumed my excavation, thinking maybe I was hearing sounds from adjacent buildings or underground utilities. But as I worked, the breathing continued, always seeming to come from directly beneath my work area. When I removed a larger section of subflooring to access the pipe connections, the breathing became more audible. It was definitely human. Too organic and rhythmic to be mechanical, too regular to be random air movement. I called out, "Hello? Is someone there?" The breathing stopped immediately. I waited in the silence for about 5 minutes, then resumed my pipe repair work. But as soon as I started using tools, the breathing resumed. Same rhythm, same depth, same location directly beneath where I was working. This pattern continued for the next 2 hours. Whenever I was actively working, I could hear steady breathing from below the foundation. Whenever I stopped to listen, the breathing would cease until I resumed my activities. It was like someone was lying beneath the concrete, sleeping while I worked above them and waking up whenever I stopped making noise. I completed the pipe repair and tested the water pressure, which returned to normal levels. But I couldn't stop thinking about the breathing sounds, so I decided to investigate further. Using a small inspection camera that I carry for diagnosing hidden pipe problems, I explored the spaces around the repair area to see if there were any openings or connections that could explain the sounds. What I found was more disturbing than a simple acoustic phenomenon. The concrete foundation showed evidence of previous excavation, areas where the slab had been cut and repoured, creating seams and joints that weren't part of the original construction. Someone had been digging beneath this building, creating spaces that shouldn't exist. I followed one of these modified areas with my inspection camera and discovered a small void beneath the foundation, not large enough for a person to occupy, but big enough to create unusual acoustic properties. But when I lowered the camera into this void, I saw something that made my hands shake. Fresh footprints in the dirt. Human footprints. Size 9 or 10 work boots, pressed into soil that should have been undisturbed since the building's construction 30 years ago. The footprints were recent, clear tread patterns, no erosion or settling that would indicate age. Someone had been walking around in spaces beneath the building that were supposed to be inaccessible. I extracted the camera and sat in the crawl space for a long time, trying to process what I'd discovered. Fresh footprints in sealed underground spaces, breathing sounds from areas where no one should be able to exist. That evening, I researched the history of the Chevron station location, looking for any information about previous construction or modifications to the building. What I found was more unsettling than I'd expected. In 1994, 5 years after the station was built, there had been a significant underground utility project in the area. A worker named Miguel Santos, employed by a local excavation company, had been killed in a trench collapse while installing new sewer lines behind the Chevron station. According to the accident report, Santos had been working alone on a night shift, digging access trenches to connect the station's waste lines to the municipal sewer system. A section of trench had collapsed around 3 a.m., burying him under several tons of earth and concrete debris. The rescue effort had taken 18 hours, but Santos was found dead at the bottom of the excavation. The report noted that he'd been trying to dig his way out when the collapse occurred. His hands were found pressed against the concrete foundation of the Chevron building, like he'd been trying to break through to the crawl space above. The final detail in the report was the most chilling. Miguel Santos had been wearing size 9 work boots, and the tread pattern matched the footprints I'd seen in the dirt beneath the foundation. "Mr. Cronkite, I think Miguel Santos is still down there, still trying to dig his way out of the trench collapse that killed him 30 years ago, still working his night shift, still trying to complete the utility connections that cost him his life. But there's something else I need to tell you. After learning about Santos's death, I returned to the Chevron station to complete some additional inspections. While I was in the crawl space, I heard the breathing sounds again. But this time, I responded differently. Miguel, if that's you down there, I want you to know that the sewer connections you were working on have been completed. The utility project was finished after your accident." The breathing stopped for a moment, then resumed with what seemed like a different rhythm, shorter, more urgent breaths. "The excavation work is done, Miguel. You don't have to keep digging. You can rest now." I heard a sound I hadn't noticed before, the scraping of tools against concrete, like someone trying to chip through the foundation from below. "Miguel, you're not trapped anymore. The trench collapse happened 30 years ago. There's no emergency to respond to, no work that needs to be finished." The scraping stopped, and everything was quiet for several minutes. Then I heard a voice, very faint, but clearly audible. "I can't get out. The dirt is too heavy." "The dirt has been cleared, Miguel. The rescue crews found you and brought you out of the trench." "But I'm still down here. I can't breathe." I realized that from Miguel Santos's perspective, he was still trapped in the collapsed trench, still suffocating under tons of earth, still fighting to escape a burial that had killed him decades ago. "Miguel, you're not in the trench anymore. You're free. You can go home to your family." There was a long silence. Then, "I can go home?" "Yes. Your work shift is over. You can go home." The breathing sounds faded gradually, and I haven't heard them since that conversation. But when I was leaving the crawl space that day, I found something that confirmed everything I'd experienced. A work glove, partially buried in the dirt near where I'd been hearing the breathing sounds. The glove was old but not decayed, like it had been preserved in the dry soil beneath the foundation, and stitched inside the cuff was a name tag, M. Santos. I've kept that glove as a reminder that some people work so hard, care so much about completing their jobs, that not even death can stop them from trying to finish what they started. Miguel Santos died trying to connect utility lines that would serve the public, trying to complete infrastructure work that would benefit people he'd never meet. Even buried alive, he kept working. Even 30 years after his death, he was still trying to dig his way back to the job site. But sometimes the dead just need someone to tell them that their work is finished, that their dedication has been recognized, that it's okay to finally rest. I'm honored to have been able to provide that closure for Miguel Santos, a working man who died doing essential work that keeps our modern world functioning. The breathing from beneath the floor has stopped, but the memory of his dedication continues. Some labor never dies. It just needs permission to finally clock out. Tyler.
Tyler, your story reveals something profound about the persistence of working-class dedication and the way some people's commitment to their jobs transcends even death itself. Miguel Santos wasn't haunting that crawl space out of anger or supernatural malevolence. He was there because someone needs to finish the utility connections. And 30 years of being buried alive hadn't convinced him that someone else could handle the job. I contacted the San Diego County Office of Emergency Services and confirmed the details about Miguel Santos's death in the trench collapse. The incident commander who supervised the rescue operation mentioned that Santos had been known for working extra hours and taking on dangerous assignments that other crew members avoided. What strikes me about your account is how you recognize Santos's continuing struggle and found a way to provide the closure he needed. Your explanation that the utility work had been completed, that his dedication was recognized, that wasn't just compassion. It was professional acknowledgement of one working man by another. The Occupational Safety and Health Administration reports that excavation and trenching accidents kill more construction workers than any other type of workplace incident. Workers like Miguel Santos die in cave-ins every year, often while working alone on night shift, often trying to complete essential infrastructure projects that the public depends on. Maybe that's why Santos's spirit was so persistent. He understood how important utility connections are to public health and safety, and he couldn't bear the thought of leaving a job unfinished, even when continuing that job was literally impossible. Your conversation with Santos, assuring him that the work was complete and he could go home. That represents something beautiful about working-class solidarity that transcends the boundary between life and death. The San Diego night air carries the scent of ocean and sage. But beneath the surface, I can imagine the network of pipes and cables and conduits that make modern life possible, all maintained by people like Tyler and Miguel Santos, who crawl through dark spaces so the rest of us can flip switches and turn faucets and expect everything to work. October nights in underground spaces have always felt thin to me, like the boundary between the buried and the breathing becomes permeable when we venture into the spaces beneath our feet. We've got one more story from the overnight shift ahead, a tale that brings us full circle to the heart of what it means to serve others, even when that service comes at the ultimate cost. Tyler, if you're listening, I want you to know that what you did for Miguel Santos represents the best of blue-collar brotherhood. You recognize that his dedication deserved respect, and you found a way to honor someone who died doing the unglamorous but essential work that keeps our infrastructure functioning. The breathing from beneath the floor has stopped, but the work continues in the hands of the living who remember those who came before. Some shifts never end, they just change hands. Stay with us for our final story from the gas station graveyard shift. We'll return after this message from underground utilities locating, because every pipe has a story and every worker deserves to come home safe. The deep night reaches its crescendo, faithful companions of the dark. Edward Cronkite here with you on WNMR, Nocturnal Mysteries Radio, as we approach the final hour of our journey through the fluorescent-lit frontier, where the living and the dead intersect in ways that daylight would never believe. That melancholic composition was The Last Shift by Atrium Carcery, and its fading notes seem to anticipate the conclusion of our overnight odyssey. The studio clock shows 3:47 a.m., and outside my windows, the October night is beginning its slow retreat toward dawn. Before we conclude tonight's exploration, I want to acknowledge something remarkable that's happened over the past few hours. My phone hasn't stopped ringing. Gas station employees from across the country calling to share their own encounters with the inexplicable, their own moments when routine work became something transcendent and strange. Each call has reinforced something I've believed for 15 years of hosting this program. The ordinary workplace can become sacred ground when it's occupied by people who care deeply about serving others, even beyond death. Our final tale brings us to Chicago, Illinois, where the wind off Lake Michigan carries the dreams and struggles of generations, and the city's heartbeat echoes through every neighborhood gas station that serves as a community anchor. This account comes from Rachel, a 33-year-old automotive department supervisor at an Exxon station in the city's Bridgeport neighborhood. Rachel's email arrived as I was preparing tonight's program, sent from what appears to be a store office computer at 4:23 a.m. The timestamp and content suggest someone finishing a shift and needing to document an experience before memory begins to soften the edges of what she witnessed. Her message carries the weight of someone who's worked in automotive retail long enough to know the difference between mechanical sounds and something else entirely. Something that moves with purpose through spaces where no one should be walking. Here's Rachel's final story for tonight.
Mr. Cronkite, I manage the automotive department at an Exxon station on Halsted Street in Chicago. We're a full-service location, gas pumps, convenience store, and an extensive automotive section that stocks everything from motor oil to brake fluid, air filters to windshield wipers. The automotive department occupies about a third of our retail space, organized in rows of metal shelving that hold thousands of automotive products. It's my responsibility to maintain inventory, assist customers with technical questions, and ensure that everything is properly stocked and organized. I've been working this position for 6 years, and I know every sound the building makes. The hum of refrigeration units, the buzz of fluorescent lighting, the settling of metal shelving as temperature changes throughout the day. It's a symphony of commercial sounds that becomes background noise when you work in it long enough. But 2 months ago, I started hearing something new. Something that didn't belong in any mechanical soundtrack. Footsteps, not customer footsteps. I can identify those easily, and they're always accompanied by voices, shopping carts, or the electronic chime of the door sensor. These were different. Heavy work boots moving deliberately through the automotive aisles, always during the overnight hours when the store was closed to customers. The first time I heard them, I assumed one of my co-workers was doing inventory or restocking after hours. But when I checked the work schedule, no one was assigned to overnight duty in the automotive department. I started paying closer attention to these footsteps, and a pattern emerged. They always occurred between 3:00 and 4:00 a.m., always followed the same route through the automotive aisles, and always stopped in the same location, near the motor oil display at the end of aisle 7. 3 weeks ago, I decided to investigate directly. I arrived early for my morning shift and positioned myself where I could observe the automotive department during the time when the footsteps usually occurred. At 3:17 a.m., I saw him, a man in his 50s, wearing oil-stained coveralls and work boots, walking slowly through the automotive aisles. He moved with the careful attention of someone checking inventory, pausing at each shelf to examine products, occasionally reaching out as if to adjust items that were out of place. But when he reached out to touch merchandise, his hands passed through the products without moving them. He was examining inventory that he could see but couldn't manipulate. I watched him complete his circuit through the automotive department, methodically checking each aisle as if conducting a thorough inspection. When he reached the motor oil display, He stopped and stood perfectly still for almost 2 minutes. Then he turned and looked directly at me. His eyes held an expression I'll never forget. Desperate, pleading, like someone trying to communicate something important but unable to find the words. He opened his mouth as if to speak, but no sound emerged. We stared at each other across the automotive department for what felt like hours but was probably only 10 seconds. Then he faded away, becoming transparent and finally disappearing completely. I remained in my observation position until dawn, but he didn't return. The next night, I was ready for him. I brought a notebook to document his route through the automotive department, thinking maybe there was a pattern that would explain what he was looking for. He appeared at exactly the same time, followed the same path through the aisles, and conducted the same careful inspection of our inventory. But this time, I noticed details I'd missed during the first encounter. His coveralls bore a name patch, Eddie, and the oil stains on his clothing weren't random. They were concentrated around the chest and sleeve areas in patterns consistent with someone who worked regularly with automotive fluids. When he reached the motor oil display, he didn't just stand there. He was reading the labels, comparing prices, examining product specifications with the attention of someone who knew automotive lubricants professionally. Then he turned to look at me again, and this time I was prepared. "Eddie, can you hear me?" I called out. He nodded slowly. "What are you looking for? What do you need?" He pointed at the motor oil display, then gestured toward the back of the store where we keep additional automotive inventory. "The oil? Is there a problem with the oil inventory?" He nodded again, more urgently this time. I walked over to the motor oil display and examined it carefully. Everything appeared normal. Proper inventory levels, correct pricing, products arranged according to our planogram. But when I checked the backstock area, I found something that explained Eddie's concern. 3 cases of motor oil had been stored incorrectly. Conventional oil mixed with synthetic blends, creating potential for customer confusion and mechanical problems if someone bought the wrong product for their vehicle. It was the kind of mistake that could cause serious engine damage if a customer used conventional oil in a car designed for synthetic blends, or vice versa. I corrected the storage problem immediately, ensuring that all oil products were properly segregated and labeled. When I returned to the sales floor, Eddie was still standing by the motor oil display. "Is that what you were trying to show me?" I asked. He smiled, the first time I'd seen any expression other than desperation on his face, and nodded. Then he faded away, and I haven't seen him since. But I became curious about who Eddie was and why he'd been so concerned about automotive inventory management. I started researching the history of our location, looking for any connection to someone who'd worked in automotive retail. What I found was both sad and inspiring. Before our current Exxon station was built, the site had been occupied by Eddie's Auto Parts, a small family-owned business that operated from 1978 to 2019. The store had been run by Edward Eddie Martinez, who'd built a reputation for expert automotive knowledge and meticulous attention to product quality. According to newspaper archives, Eddie Martinez had died of a heart attack in 2019 while working alone in his store, reorganizing inventory after discovering that a distributor had delivered incorrect oil specifications. He'd been found the next morning, surrounded by cases of motor oil that he'd been carefully sorting to prevent customer confusion. His obituary mentioned that Eddie had never sold a customer the wrong automotive product in 41 years of business, and that he'd often stayed late to double-check inventory when deliveries didn't match his quality standards. Mr. Cronkite, I think Eddie Martinez is still looking out for automotive customers, still making sure that people get the right products for their vehicles. Even death couldn't stop his commitment to preventing the kind of mechanical problems that result from incorrect automotive fluids. But there's something else I need to tell you. Since my encounter with Eddie, I've become much more careful about inventory management in our automotive department. I double-check every delivery, verify product specifications against our ordering system, and ensure that similar products are properly segregated. And I've discovered 3 more inventory errors that could have caused customer problems: wrong viscosity oil, incompatible brake fluid, and air filters that were mislabeled for the wrong vehicle applications. Each time I've corrected these problems, I've felt like Eddie was watching, making sure I maintained the standards of accuracy and customer service that he'd upheld for 4 decades. Yesterday, while reorganizing the motor oil display, I found a small piece of paper tucked behind one of the product information cards. Written in what appeared to be pencil was a simple message: "Thank you for keeping customers safe. Eddie M." I've kept that note in my cash register, a reminder that some people care so much about serving others that not even death can end their dedication to quality and safety. Eddie Martinez spent his life making sure automotive customers got exactly what they needed to keep their vehicles running safely. His commitment to accuracy and service continues through anyone willing to maintain those same standards. Some customer service never dies, it just finds new hands to continue the work. Rachel.
Rachel, your final story brings us full circle to the heart of what we've been exploring tonight, the way genuine dedication to serving others can transcend death itself, finding expression through those who share the same commitment to quality and care. Eddie Martinez represents every small business owner who's built their reputation on expertise and integrity, who's stayed late countless nights to ensure their customers receive exactly what they need. His continuing presence in your automotive department isn't supernatural surveillance. It's the persistence of values that our throwaway culture desperately needs. As I sit here in my studio, watching the October dawn begin to lighten the eastern sky, I'm struck by the common thread running through every story we've shared tonight. John's Dr. Morrison still trying to help people breathe. Emily's products expressing the desperate needs of customers. Michael's Jennifer still trying to complete her final transaction. Jessica's Carol seeking freedom from addiction. David's Marcus Webb ensuring chemical safety. Laura's Neon Heart's warning of cardiac danger. Chris's Robert Chen searching for warmth. Megan's Harold Mills maintaining mechanical perfection. Ryan's William Torres continuing his security patrols. Sarah's Robert Finch updating his electrical knowledge. Tyler's Miguel Santos still trying to complete his utility connections. And finally, Rachel's Eddie Martinez ensuring automotive accuracy. Each one represents someone who found their calling in service to others and refused to let death end that service. These aren't ghost stories, fellow travelers. These are stories about the persistence of human dedication, about people who cared so deeply about their work that mortality couldn't convince them to abandon their posts. In a world that often treats customer service as an inconvenience and quality craftsmanship as obsolete, these spirits remind us that some people still believe work can be sacred, that serving others is a calling worth pursuing beyond the grave. The gas station graveyard shift, those fluorescent-lit hours when the boundary between worlds grows thin, has given us a glimpse into the continuing presence of those who understood that every job, no matter how humble, can be performed with dignity and dedication. The coffee in my studio has grown cold, the October night is surrendering to dawn, and our journey through the mysterious world of late-night commerce has reached its conclusion. But the stories continue, don't they? In every convenience store where an employee goes the extra mile, in every gas station where someone takes pride in their work, in every workplace where human dedication creates something larger than a simple transaction. To all the overnight workers listening, the cashiers and pump attendants, the security guards and maintenance technicians, the cleaners and stock clerks, know that your work matters in ways you may never fully understand. You're part of a tradition of service that extends back through generations and forward into whatever comes next. And to the spirits who still walk among us, still trying to complete their final tasks, may you find the peace that comes from knowing your dedication has been witnessed, your service has been honored, and your example continues to inspire the living. The night retreats, but the mysteries remain. The fluorescent lights buzz their electric lullabies, and somewhere out there, in gas stations across the country, the overnight shift continues, tended by both the living and the dead, united in their commitment to keeping the world running smoothly. This has been Edward Cronkite, your companion through the darker territories of human experience, signing off from WNMR, Nocturnal Mysteries Radio. Thank you for joining me on this journey through the spaces where ordinary work becomes extraordinary calling. The dawn is breaking, but the stories never end. Until we meet again in the small hours when mystery and reality converge, remember that every workplace is haunted by the dedication of those who came before, by the standards they set, and by the reminder that some commitments transcend death itself. Keep the night shift burning, friends. I'll see you next Saturday when the moon is dark and the stories are waiting to be told. Sweet dreams, night owls. May your sleep be peaceful and your work be blessed by those who watch over us all. This is WNMR, signing off until the darkness calls us back together.